Have you noticed how, with the passing years, truth stops banging on the door and starts slipping in through the window, soft-footed, almost shy? Time no longer sprints ahead, daring us to catch it. It ambles at our side, palm open, offering a mirror. In that quiet reflection, we begin to see the long-hidden blueprints of our days, our patterns and their ruts, our peace and its conditions, our pain and its teachings. People call these truths harsh. Perhaps they are only honest, and perhaps we spent a lifetime turning up the volume of everything else so we wouldn't hear them. Tonight, let's not make noise. Let's sit like old friends on a porch after sundown, the air warm, the sky unhurried. We'll walk one lantern at a time along a path of 13 truths, not to judge ourselves, but to know ourselves more gently. The first lantern is this: the mind is not you. Listen closely. Even in a room devoid of sound, there's a murmuring somewhere inside, cataloging, critiquing, scripting the next scene. Thoughts braid themselves without asking permission, memories bumping hips with forecasts, fantasies borrowing clothes from fear. Some days, the mind behaves like a street market at noon, everyone waving, bargaining, shouting about what matters. We mistake the market for the city, the noise for the law, the stall for the center of town. But there is a wider city, isn't there? Streets that are quiet before dawn, a river that moves beneath stone bridges, bells that ring even when no one is listening. The market is not the whole. I once met an old clockmaker named Arlen, who kept a tiny shop between a bakery and a second-hand bookstore. He'd been repairing watches since before his hair went silver. The shop was filled with soft, ticking, the sound of time keeping itself company. I asked him if he ever grew weary of the noise. He smiled and turned a key in a pocket watch. "People bring me these when the hands won't move," he said. "But what's almost always wrong is the regulator, the piece that sets the rhythm. The hands are innocent. They only follow what tells them how to dance." He held the watch to my ear. Tick. Pause. Tick. Most of us think we are the hands, he added. We swing from moment to moment and call it me. But what we are is closer to the stillness that hears the ticking. When I remember that the noise doesn't own me. The teachings of the Buddha do not demonize the mind. They bow to its power. A well-trained mind can be compass and lamp boat and oar. But it is a tool, not the owner. If you have ever held a camera too close to your face, you know how it narrows the world. Everything becomes your subject. Your eye grows restless. Your breath goes shallow. Step back, and suddenly the whole landscape reappears. The wind in the grass, a bird stitching across the sky, the way light forgives the edges of everything. Stepping back from the mind is like that. You are not abandoning life. You're letting it widen. A meditation teacher once said to me, "Thoughts are like paper boats people set on a canal at festival time. They pass lantern-lit, each carrying a little prayer. Some are lovely, some sink. None of them is the water." I kept that image close. On days when my inner market is loud, I picture a quiet canal at dusk and let the boats glide by. Some boats promise safety. Some wave red flags. Some carry faces I miss. The practice is the same, watching without boarding. Watching until the water's own calm begins to show itself. What makes this so difficult is not that we think, it's that we believe everything we think. The mind says, "This is urgent." We bow. It says, "This is who you are." We sign the contract, but closer listening reveals something subtler than thought, older than language. It lives in the pauses between words, in the exhale after a long sentence, in the stretch of silence when a bird stops singing, and even the trees seem to lean in. That quiet presence doesn't argue with the mind. It simply doesn't confuse itself with it. When you begin to rest there even for a few breaths, the mind softens like a child who finally realizes the adult in the room is kind. Let me offer you a small practice, not a technique to perfect, just a gentle way of returning. Sit comfortably. Feel the weight of your body as if the earth were cupping you in its palm. Invite your attention to the space just behind your thoughts, the way you might lean into the cool side of a pillow. Notice the next thought as if a bird landed on a nearby branch. You don't have to chase it. You don't have to shoo it away. Let it be. Count 3 breaths as if you were counting waves. With each breath, ask softly, who is hearing this? Not to get an answer, but to feel the question open a window. 3 breaths is enough to remember. There is hearing distinct from the song, sky distinct from weather awareness, distinct from the stories it illuminates. We age and roles shift like furniture in a familiar room. The titles we wore loosen. The world grows less interested in our conclusions and more healed by our presence. This is an invitation, not an insult. When you are less entangled with the mind's insistence, your compassion ripens. You can listen without rehearsing your reply. You can watch your own irritation crest and break without making it someone else's storm. You can meet a worry at the door, offer it tea, and ask what it is trying awkwardly to protect. The mind may always have opinions. That is its way. But you are not obligated to employ each one as your ambassador. Arlen the clockmaker once placed a disassembled watch on velvet so I could see its heart. The balance wheel swings because it must, he said. Back and forth, back and forth. Our minds do the same. He tapped the bench with his knuckle. But the bench doesn't sway with it. The bench holds. Then he laughed. I try to be more bench. I carry his words when my mind is a pendulum and the day begs me to swing. If you've been restless lately, if sleep has become a hallway of doors, you keep opening onto more hallways. Try not to make an enemy of your thinking. Sit at the threshold and greet the next thought, the way you might greet a neighbor in the evening kindly, without obligation to entertain. Ah, there you are, fear about tomorrow's appointment. Ah, there you are, replay of last week's conversation. Bow to each. Let each continue down the sidewalk. Your dignity in this season of life is not in how many thoughts you conquer, but in how lightly you hold the reins. Sometimes people ask, if I am not my thoughts, who am I? The teachings point, not to an object you can hold, but to a way of being you can taste. When the mind quiets, and even when it doesn't, you are the spaciousness in which everything appears. You are the clear lake in which clouds reflect the stage on which actors forget and remember their lines, the hospitable room where sorrow rests its head and joy washes its hands. You are the awareness that neither clings nor refuses. That awareness is not far away. It is as near as this breath. Before we move on, consider this. What might change if you did not treat each thought like a decree? How would your day soften if you let the inner market wind down at dusk and listened instead for the bell in some far corner of town? Perhaps you would find that there is a you untouched by the mind's weather, a you that has been patient all along. And now, with a little more space around the noise, we can ask the next honest question. If the mind is not the master, why do we suffer as we do? The body aches. The heart remembers the old stories tug at our sleeve. Pain arrives at the threshold. Must we barricade the door, or is there another way to meet it? The next lantern waits at the bend in the path, its light gentler than you think. There is a particular hour of the evening when the light thins and the world loosens. its grip. Dogs grow quiet, kettles sigh, and the day admits both its triumphs and its costs. In that hour, the body often speaks in a language older than words, a throb where cartilage has thinned a tug in the chest, where memory keeps a house, a tiredness whose roots run all the way down to childhood. Many of us have spent years negotiating with that voice, bargaining, outmaneuvering, refusing. We call it pain and appoint it our adversary. But what if pain is not a trespasser to be expelled, but a messenger who refuses to lie? In the tradition we walk, the Buddha never promised a life without ache. He pointed instead to a clear seeing of it, dukkha, the friction in living, and to the way we multiply it by throwing our weight against what already is. The teaching is simple to hear and exceedingly tender to practice. Suffering blooms when resistance becomes our discipline. Consider an ocean wave breaking. The wave does what waves do. If we brace like a wall, the water strikes. If we soften like a reed, the water passes. A fisherman named Tao once told me that he had learned this lesson not from scriptures, but from storms. He worked a small boat off a river mouth, mending nets and gathering his catch before dawn. One monsoon season, a gust flipped his skiff and threw him into water the color of iron. Instinct clawed for the surface, but his jacket snagged on a hook and held. The more he thrashed, the more the net cinched. An old memory surfaced, his father teaching him to loosen a knotted rope by leaning into the slack, not pulling against the strain. Tao stopped fighting. He exhaled, tucked his chin, and the current no longer opposed, rolled him free. The river was not for me or against me, he said. I was only learning how to meet it. Pain, too, is a current. Fight it with fury and the knot tightens. Meet it with attention and a softer intelligence appears. This is not romance. It is apprenticeship. To pain, we bring our presence, our patience, our breath tools, humbler than knives, quieter than pills, sometimes more faithful than both. When we label pain enemy, we tend to add armor tension in the jaw, a story about what this means for the rest of our life, a judgment about how we should be handling it by now. Armor is heavy. It transmits the force of every blow directly to the heart. The practice is to lay down one piece at a time. Begin small, unclench your teeth. Let the shoulders fall as if someone you trust set warm hands on them. Widen the breath not to deepen the pain, but to make room for it. Room is not surrender. Room is wisdom's foyer. A gardener in her late 70s, whom I'll call Mireille, taught me another way. Arthritis had made her fingers bloom like knotted roots. She could no longer prune roses with the quick confidence she loved. I stopped asking my hands to be 20, she told me, and started asking them to be honest. She reduced her beds, chose plants that welcomed neglect, and scheduled an hour each morning to walk the perimeter touching leaves. When it hurt, I'd say, "Here you are," not "Go away." There was a new kind of sweetness hidden inside that sentence, like discovering the bitter rind of an orange makes the inside taste brighter. This is not a cure. It is a companionship, an intimacy with the body that grows when we stop deserting it in hard weather. Sometimes pain wears an older mask. It arrives not in joints, but in memory. The letter never answered. The child who drifted to a life beyond our reach. The love we could not steward past its season. Emotional pain asks for the same dignity. Physical pain does notice me carefully. Do not confuse me with the story you built around me. Let me move. One woman carried a grievance like a hot coal for decades. When she finally set it down, she said she saw the shape of her own hand more clearly, the places where she had gripped too hard, and the tender places she had never allowed to hold anything at all. Pain's gift is not punishment. Its gift is precision. It points exactly where love must learn a new skill. Meet pain with curiosity. My teacher once said the way you might study a moth at the window. Where is it located? Does it have edges? Does it pulse or hum or sit like a stone? Does it change when you breathe toward it rather than away? Converting pain into a subject of gentle inquiry is different from obsessing. Obsession tries to control. Inquiry tries to understand. And understanding in the Dharma is the first sip of freedom. There are days when inquiry feels too sophisticated, when pain arrives like a storm with its own agenda. On those days, we lean on simpler supports. Rest becomes religion. Warmth becomes medicine. A bath, sunlight on the knees, a blanket preheated like an old kindness. Contact becomes prayer, a hand on one's own heart as if greeting a beloved, the spine against a chair that agrees to carry you, the floor under your feet reminding you earth has not abandoned its post. In these rituals, the body hears a promise: I will not leave you alone in this. Pain often softens when loneliness does. In monasteries where winter bites, novices learn to chop wood in the snow. Cold makes the hands slow. Fatigue makes the mind argue. Smoke stings. The axe glances off a knot and rattles the bones. They are taught to pause, stand the axe in the block, and smile just a little, so the body recalls that labor is not war. The smile is not for cheerfulness. It is a seal: even here, I will not become my own enemy. Imagine applying that same seal when pain knocks a small private smile, not because you like it, but because you refuse to turn against yourself. We are not asked to enjoy pain. We are asked to stop auditioning for a different life while this one calls our name. This asking is not cruel. It is deeply merciful. Reality does not punish. It invites. The Buddha's compassion was clinical in the best sense, clear-eyed and exquisitely kind. He taught causes and conditions, not blame. Much of what hurts in us was planted by weather beyond our control. Yet how we meet it today, that part is the path under our feet. There is a field of life we only discover as we age, where strength is not measured by denial, but by tenderness. To be tender is to feel without drowning, to stay without fusing, to bow without collapsing. There is a grace that ripens in elders who have practiced this. Their faces carry maps of storms endured, and yet their voices fall like shade at noon. Sit near such a person, and your heart slows. You realize that pain can be present without ruling. You realize, perhaps for the first time, that peace does not depend on perfect conditions. It depends on intimacy with what is. If you are carrying an old ache tonight, physical or otherwise, I will not offer you a slogan. I will offer you a chair. Sit. Let your breath arrive from a place deeper than fear. Place one palm on the side of ache if you can, and if you cannot, place your hand on your belly, that ancient drum. On the inhale, silently say, here. On the exhale, I am. Here. I am. 5 breaths like that. Then ask softly, what do you need from me right now? Not forever. Now. The answer might be water. It might be a phone call. It might be sleep. It might be to set down the second weight. The story that says, this pain must define your days. Pain needs companionship more than it needs conquest. When we learn to accompany our pain, something unexpected becomes possible. We become gentler with the pain of others. The neighbor whose steps have slowed the friend, whose jokes got sharper after her divorce, the stranger in the pharmacy counting coins, each is carrying weather we cannot see. Your tenderness becomes shelter. Your patience becomes a bench at the bus stop of someone else's difficult afternoon. In this way, pain met wisely becomes a school for compassion. And yet, there is another visitor we invite when pain is in the room: comparison. We glance at those who seem to move more easily, love more smoothly, age more elegantly, and the ache sharpens. Why does their path look sunlit while mine bends through thicket? Comparison walks quietly, but steals quickly the torch in the hand of a thief. If pain teaches tenderness, comparison teaches scarcity. Let us not let it. Our next lantern will show us how. There is a quiet ache that seldom speaks aloud, the ache of measuring ourselves against others. It does not roar. It hums beneath the skin. It appears when we scroll through the bright parade of someone else's life, when we hear a neighbor's laughter through the window, when we watch another's ease and mistake it for perfection. Comparison begins as curiosity and ends as corrosion. It robs the heart of gratitude and paints shadows over what was once enough. In youth, comparison can masquerade as ambition. It pushes us forward, tells us there is more to strive for. But as we age, its tone changes. It no longer urges, it accuses, it whispers, "You should have achieved more by now, loved better, aged slower, mattered longer." It takes the fullness of a life and reduces it to a ledger. Yet the Dharma reminds us all, beings bloom in their own season, and no flower rushes another's unfolding. I once met a man named Elias, who had been a musician all his life, a quiet cellist who played in the back rows of an orchestra that never traveled far from its small city. One evening after a performance, he sat beside me on the temple steps. "I used to envy the soloists," he said. "Their names on posters, their faces lit by applause. But when I play alone now in my living room, something happens. The sound fills the space exactly as it is meant to. I realize the bow doesn't ask if the note is famous. It only asks if it is true." His words were a bell in the dark. Comparison is the desire for another's rhythm while forgetting the holiness of our own. Each of us carries a melody that cannot be replicated. Even silence, when lived fully, becomes part of the song. In the forest, no tree competes for height. The birch leans in its pale grace. The pine holds scent instead of color. A river does not envy the sea, it knows its purpose is to feed it. Yet humans with our restless minds count and compare. We weigh the visible and ignore the invisible, the patience that shaped us, the kindness unrecorded, the resilience that no one applauded. There is an old story told in monasteries about two lanterns hanging outside a temple. One was made of fine brass polished to mirror the sun. The other was of clay, simple and unglazed. Each night they burned side by side. Over time, the brass lantern began to boast. "Your dull surface gives no light," it said. "You are plain forgotten." The clay lantern listened, but said nothing. One night, a storm swept through. The brass lantern, heavy and proud, fell and cracked the stone below. The clay lantern, light and porous, swayed with the wind and remained. At dawn, both were silent, but only one was still shining. We are like those lanterns. The brightness others see is not the proof of endurance. Sometimes what looks unremarkable is quietly unbreakable. The clay endures not by strength, but by flexibility, and that is its wisdom. In the practice of mindfulness, comparison is a teacher wearing a disguise. When jealousy stirs, it reveals where we feel incomplete. When envy bites, it shows the edge of our self-image that still seeks confirmation. Instead of condemning those feelings, bow to them. They are not enemies. They are signposts. Ask what part of me believes I am lacking. That question asked honestly can dissolve years of bitterness. I once guided a woman named Lynn through this reflection. She had spent decades raising her children alone, and when they grew, she compared herself endlessly to other mothers, those with larger homes, brighter smiles, grander holidays. During retreat, she brought me a small drawing her granddaughter had made. It was of Lynn's wrinkled hands holding a teacup. Underneath, the child had written, "Grandma makes time taste warm." Lynn wept. "All these years," she said, "I thought I was behind. But maybe I was simply here." That moment reminded me comparison thrives on distance. Gratitude thrives on presence. The mind that is truly here cannot envy, because it is busy witnessing. The Buddha once said, "There is no fire like desire, no chain like hatred, no net like delusion." Comparison is all three. It burns the heart with longing, binds it with judgment, and veils the truth that there was never a race to begin with. The path to awakening is not a competition. It is a return. Each step taken sincerely is complete in itself. If you could see the lives you envy from the inside, you would see what you never could from afar: the unseen struggles, the sleepless nights, the quiet loneliness that no photograph shows. Compassion, not comparison, is the natural response of wisdom. When you remember that the heart loosens, you no longer look sideways, you look within. Try this simple contemplation tonight. As you lie down, think of one aspect of your life that once made you feel small. Then whisper, "Thank you for teaching me enoughness." Feel how the words land. You may not believe them at first, that is all right. Say them again tomorrow. Gratitude is not repetition of optimism. It is practice in truth-telling. In time, you will notice something subtle. The heart that stops comparing starts creating. It becomes fertile ground. When freed from measurement, we finally live. A conversation with a neighbor becomes art. A morning cup of tea becomes prayer. The ordinary day, no longer stacked against another's, becomes luminous. So, dear one, if you find yourself glancing sideways, pause. Remember that the sun rises differently on every leaf, and yet all share its warmth. You do not need to outshine anyone. You only need to turn toward the light that is already yours. And yet, beneath comparison, lies a deeper longing, the yearning to be loved, to be seen, to belong. It is this tender desire that often traps us in attachment, mistaking love for ownership. Let us walk now softly into the next truth, where we learn that love does not bind, it frees. Love, when it first enters our lives, arrives like spring rain, fragrant, spontaneous, and alive. It softens the hardened soil of the heart and calls forth wild flowers of tenderness we did not know could bloom. But with time, we begin to build fences around that field. We say, "This is mine." We mistake affection for possession, and in our fear of loss, we begin to grasp. That grasping, the Buddha said, is where suffering begins. I remember once walking through a village in the hills of Chiang Rai, where the evening air smelled faintly of rice smoke and jasmine. An old woman sat on her porch weaving baskets. Beside her was a small wooden cage, its door open. Inside, a bird perched calmly on the crossbar, unmoving. "Why don't you let it go?" I asked. She smiled without looking up. "I did," she said, "long ago. But it stays because it wants to." Her words have followed me ever since. To love without ownership is to love like that, with an open door. Most of us, though, have learned a different kind of love. We fall in love and begin to believe that the person we cherish completes us. We build expectations disguised as promises. Be here when I call. Reflect the version of me I want to see. Stay the same so I don't have to change. But love that cannot breathe becomes fear dressed as devotion. There is a story I often tell about two travelers who shared a single lantern as they crossed a dark forest. The elder carried it first, lighting the path for both. After some time, the younger said, "Let me take the lantern so you can rest." But the elder hesitated. "If I hand it to you," he said, "I won't see the way." The younger smiled. "You will by the light I carry." Reluctantly, the elder released the handle. For a moment, everything went dark. Then the glow reappeared ahead, softer, but still sure. He realized that the light was never his to keep. It was always meant to move between them. That too is love. It is a light that passes through us, not a treasure we can store. In Buddhist practice, we speak often of metta, loving kindness, the wish for all beings to be happy and free. Notice it doesn't say the wish for me to be happy because of another. True metta is impersonal in the most beautiful way. It does not divide between mine and yours. It simply radiates. When we practice metta deeply, even those who have hurt us begin to receive our goodwill, not because they deserve it in the worldly sense, but because our peace depends on it. To love without ownership is not to detach from life, but to engage with it more purely. It is to hold the hand of another without chaining it to listen, without needing to be right, to give without keeping score. It is to bless someone's journey, even when that journey no longer includes us. I once met a man named Carlo at a meditation retreat in Tuscany. He had lost his wife 2 years earlier after 50 years of marriage. He spoke softly, each word measured as if he were still learning to breathe without her. One evening, under a canopy of olive trees, he said, "I used to talk to her photo every night. I'd tell her I missed her, that I couldn't move on. Then one night, I heard myself say, 'You are free.' And for the first time, I slept through till morning." Carlo hadn't stopped loving his wife. He had simply stopped trying to keep her bound to the world through his sorrow. In releasing her, he released himself. That is what love without ownership does. It liberates both giver and receiver. Love the Buddha taught is not attachment tanha. Attachment says, "I love you, so you must make me happy." True love says, "I love you, and I wish you happiness, even if that happiness does not include me." The first seeks control, the second seeks connection. The first fears loss, the second understands impermanence. The first clings to form, the second rests in essence. Letting love breathe does not mean it fades, it deepens. It becomes vast, like the sky that holds every passing cloud without asking it to stay. Some clouds bring rain, others drift by empty and white. The sky remains unchanged, that is love in its awakened form. If there is someone you love right now, a partner, a child, a parent, even someone far away, pause for a moment and picture them clearly. See their face as it truly is, changing, alive, shaped by time and story. Then whisper silently, "May you be well. May you be free. May I love you enough to let you be." Feel how those words loosen something in your chest. That loosening is freedom disguised as grief. And what of self-love? It too must be freed from ownership. Often we love ourselves only when we are successful, beautiful, productive. But these are conditions, not compassion. To love oneself without ownership is to embrace even the parts we do not admire, the clumsy, the fearful, the aging, the uncertain. It is to say, I belong to life, not to an image of who I was. Love, when purified of ownership, becomes boundless compassion, karuna. It moves beyond romance and kinship. It becomes the pulse of understanding that runs through everything. When you love like this, you do not exhaust yourself. the heart becomes like a well that fills as it gives. So if you are holding someone tightly tonight, through longing, regret, or hope, try loosening your grip just a little. Love does not fall apart when released. It expands. It fills the space between souls instead of collapsing them into one. And yet, even as love expands, there are times when its threads are cut by pain, betrayal, misunderstanding, or loss too deep to mend. In those moments, love asks for its final act of courage, forgiveness. Not to erase the past, but to walk through it without chains. Let us now step gently into the next truth, the doorway through which all wounded hearts must eventually pass. Forgiveness. What a tender and difficult word. It sounds like a feather, yet carries the weight of years. For some, it tastes of surrender. For others, of salvation. We resist it because we misunderstand it. We think forgiveness means saying, "It didn't matter." But forgiveness in truth means whispering, "It mattered deeply, but I choose not to live there anymore." Many of us have carried invisible stones in our pockets for decades, names we cannot mention without our pulse-changing moments we replay like worn film until even the edges blur. We carry them thinking we are protecting ourselves, when in fact, we are only keeping the wound open. The Buddha once said, "Holding on to anger is like grasping a hot coal with the intent of throwing it at someone else. You are the one who gets burned." To forgive is not to excuse or forget. It is to set the coal down, to let the skin breathe again. There is a story told in the northern monasteries about a farmer who lived beside a river. One night, thieves raided his home, taking everything he owned, tools, animals, even his late wife's shawl. The next morning, the farmer stood before the empty yard and wept. Days passed, and anger nested in his chest, like a hawk circling again and again. Then one dawn, as he went to fetch water, he noticed the reflection of clouds moving across the river's surface. For a moment, he realized even the river cannot keep its reflection. It lets go every second. That morning, he said aloud to the water, "May those who wronged me find peace." He expected lightning, or maybe a surge of grace. Nothing happened except that his own breath deepened. The hawk inside his chest took flight and did not return. His neighbors called him foolish. The Buddha would have called him free. We often imagine forgiveness as a single heroic act, but it is rarely so neat. It comes in waves like the tide reclaiming the shore one breath at a time. You may think you've forgiven only for resentment to whisper again years later. That's all right. Forgiveness is not an event. It's a practice. Each time you choose it, the heart learns a new language of release. I once sat with a woman named Ruth during a silent retreat in the mountains of Colorado. She had lost her brother to an act of violence decades earlier and carried bitterness that had calcified into her spine. "If I forgive him," she said, "it feels like betraying my brother." I told her gently, forgiveness does not rewrite the story. It releases your role in its suffering. She wept not out of guilt, but relief. Months later, she wrote to me, "I haven't forgotten, but I'm no longer imprisoned by remembering." Forgiveness in its pure form is not something you do for another. It's something you allow within yourself. It is a doorway, not a destination. You walk through it, not to greet the one who hurt you, but to meet the part of yourself that stopped growing the day the wound was made. Think of it this way. Resentment is a room without windows. You pace inside, rehearsing the pain, keeping it alive by narrating it. Forgiveness is the courage to open the shutters and let the light in, not because the view outside has changed, but because you have. In Buddhist psychology, we speak of upekkha, equanimity. It is the stillness that arises when love and wisdom balance perfectly. Forgiveness is upekkha in motion, a calm recognition that every being, including the one who hurt us, is bound by ignorance, craving, and fear. We forgive not to absolve their actions, but to dissolve our own hatred. As one old monk said, "I cannot stop the wind, but I can open my fist." There's a story of an aging monk who once met the bandit who had robbed his monastery years before. The bandit had lost everything: his health, his family, his sight. When he recognized the monk's voice, he knelt and cried, "I ruined your life." The monk replied, "My son, you only tested it. I ruined it when I chose anger instead of compassion, but today I repair it." He took the bandit's hands and pressed them to his heart. In that touch there was no superiority, no punishment, only the silent understanding that both had suffered enough. Forgiveness, then, is an act of humility. It says, "I too have harmed. I too have failed. I too wish to begin again." We forgive others to remember that we ourselves are forgivable. If there is someone whose shadow still lingers in your heart, you need not force reconciliation. You need only breathe their name with compassion once. Try it tonight. Sit quietly. Picture the person. See them not as they were when they hurt you, but as they were before, small, uncertain, trying to navigate their own storms. Whisper, "May you be free from the causes of your suffering." You may feel resistance. That's natural. Say it again. Even if you don't mean it fully, your heart hears the intention and begins to soften. And do not forget to turn the same blessing inward. May I be free from the causes of my suffering. Forgiving others while condemning yourself is like trying to walk with one leg in water and the other in fire. Both must cool before you can move forward. The act of forgiveness ripples outward. A kind word withheld in anger becomes spoken in peace. A long silence between family members thaws. A community heals not through perfection, but through someone's quiet decision to stop repeating the past. In this way, forgiveness is not weakness, it is creation. So tonight, as the world hums itself toward sleep, ask yourself softly, who am I still carrying? And is it time to set them down? Not because they deserve it, but because you do. For when the heart releases its old burdens, something miraculous happens. It becomes spacious enough to recognize a new kind of strength, not the strength of conquest, but the strength of gentleness, the kind that stands firm without violence and soft without fear. Let us walk now quietly and bravely into that next truth. We grow up in a world that teaches us to measure strength by volume, by the loudness of our victories, the sharpness of our words, the firmness of our stance. We are told that to be strong means to stand taller than others, to prove, to push, to conquer. And for many years we try. We fight our way through careers, through arguments, through heartbreaks, carrying the banner of resilience. But somewhere along the road, perhaps in the hush after loss, perhaps in the weight of age, a different kind of strength begins to whisper. It does not shout, and it does not need witnesses. It simply sits quiet and immovable, like a mountain that has stopped comparing itself to the wind. The Buddha once said, "A man is not called strong because he can subdue others. He is called strong because he can subdue himself." True strength is the ability to stay soft in a hard world, to keep one's heart open when everything inside screams to close. It is patience in the face of misunderstanding, forgiveness in the face of hurt, and calm in the face of chaos. I once met a man named Tenzin in a monastery in Bhutan, a humble caretaker who swept the temple floors every dawn. During a period of political unrest, soldiers marched into the temple and demanded that the monks hand over their valuables. Fear rippled through the hall like wind through tall grass, but Tenzin continued sweeping. When a soldier barked, "Why are you not afraid?" he looked up, broom in hand, and said softly, "Because fear cannot sweep this floor for me." The soldier, startled, said nothing. Later, when I asked him what he meant, Tenzin smiled. "I do what this moment asks. Fear is not my duty." His words carried the stillness of an ocean untouched by storm. That I realized is what true strength looks like, not a roar, but an unshakable presence. There was another story I once heard from a retired nurse named Margaret. She had worked decades in a hospice ward where she witnessed death so often it became both teacher and companion. She told me about a man who had been estranged from his son for 20 years. On his final night, the son arrived angry and trembling, spilling years of resentment. Margaret thought the father would respond in kind. Instead, the old man simply reached out, placed a frail hand on his son's, and said, "You made it. That's enough." She said that moment changed her forever. I realized strength isn't in the jawline or the posture, she said. It's in the surrender that holds no bitterness. Yes, strength does not always look like defiance. Sometimes it looks like forgiveness. We often mistake silence for weakness, but silence, true silence, is the sound of self-mastery. It is the refusal to let the mind storm decide your weather. When insulted, the strong heart does not rush to defend. When praised, it does not inflate. It watches both like clouds passing through the same sky. This is not indifference. This is wisdom wearing calm as armor. In meditation practice, we are taught to sit like a mountain-grounded, vast patient. The mountain does not resist the storm, nor does it cling to the sun. It receives both and remains. True strength is the mountain within you that receives the changing weather of life without losing its base. I once guided a young woman named Elise who had come to a retreat after a long season of grief. Her mother had passed, her marriage had ended, and her health was failing. She told me, "I am tired of being strong." I said, "Then perhaps it's time to be steady instead." She looked at me in confusion. "What's the difference?" I told her. "Strength fights. Steadiness stays." In that moment, she began to cry, not because she was weak, but because she realized she no longer needed to battle the current. The river was carrying her anyway. The courage was not in resisting, but in trusting the flow. True strength, then, is not about control. It's about surrendering the illusion of control. It is knowing that pain and peace, loss and love all pass through the same door. The strong do not slam that door. They open it wide and bow. When the Buddha was once asked how to measure greatness, he replied, "Not by how high one climbs, but by how gently one walks." Gentleness is not softness of will. It is precision of heart. To be gentle in a cruel world is not naive. It is revolutionary. Think of water. It yields to every shape yet wears down mountains. It moves around obstacles without losing direction. It does not argue with gravity. It dances with it. The Taoists say, "Nothing is softer than water, yet nothing can resist it." Buddhism nods in agreement. The strongest being is the one who no longer needs to prove strength at all. You have seen this kind of quiet power in elders who listen more than they speak, who respond to anger with calm, who forgive before being asked. Their stillness is not passivity. It is the fruit of understanding. They have learned that noise solves nothing. They know that serenity, once cultivated, becomes its own protection. So if you find yourself weary of proving, let this be your permission to rest in stillness. You do not need to shout to be heard by the universe. You do not need to fight to be free. Sit quietly, breathe deeply, and trust that silence too has a voice, one that speaks through presence. And now, as we stand in the hush of that silence, a new lesson begins to unfold, a lesson about the restless guest who fears stillness most, the ego. It cannot bear silence because silence exposes its smallness, and yet to see the ego clearly is to step closer to liberation. Let us walk gently now into the next truth, the one that reveals how the noise of the mind is born from fear, and how peace begins when we dare to listen beyond it. Have you ever noticed what happens when the world around you grows utterly quiet? When the TV goes dark, the phone is turned face down, and even the hum of conversation fades into still air. At first, there's peace, but soon, something stirs, a restlessness under the ribs, a flicker of unease. Thoughts crowd in like uninvited guests. What now? What should I be doing? Who am I without all this noise? That tightness, that urge to fill the quiet, that is the ego trembling. The ego does not know how to exist without echoes. It feeds on definition, on praise, on comparison, on stories of me. It builds itself from sound, the clatter of achievement, the murmur of validation, the applause of attention. But when silence arrives, all those walls vanish. Without noise to reflect against the ego, loses its outline, and so it panics. There was once a monk who spent decades studying sutras, but avoided meditation. When asked why, he admitted, "Because when I sit still, I meet myself, and I don't always like the company." His teacher replied, "Then sit longer. In time you will find there was never an intruder, only an echo asking to be loved." That's the paradox of silence. It terrifies the ego, but heals the soul. We spend much of our lives constructing identities: parent, professional friend, healer, achiever. These roles give structure and purpose, but they also hide us. When life begins to shift, when children leave careers end or bodies age, the ego feels the tremor of impermanence and cries out, "If I am no longer this, then who am I?" It cannot comprehend being without becoming. But Buddhism whispers a deeper truth: you were never the mask. You were the space behind it, the awareness that watched each role come and go like waves on a tide. Once during a retreat in Kyoto, I sat with an elderly calligrapher named Sora. He told me that when he was young, his strokes were bold and precise, full of confidence. But as he grew older, his hands began to tremble. He tried to hide it until one day he let the brush shake freely. At first, he said the lines looked broken. Then I realized they looked alive. He smiled. The brush taught me what the ego could not, that perfection is not the point. Presence is. In silence, the brush of our own mind begins to tremble too. And if we can resist the urge to control it, it starts to reveal something raw, true, unguarded. The ego trembles, not because silence is empty, but because silence is full of everything it cannot manipulate: truth, impermanence, and the vastness of being. The Buddha taught Anatta the doctrine of non-self, not as a denial of existence, but as an invitation to freedom. Imagine your ego as a small flame. It flares, flickers, changes color with each gust of circumstance. We spend our lives shielding that flame, terrified it will go out. But beyond it is the vast light of awareness, constant and unmoved. When the small flame fades, we do not disappear. We return to the greater fire. And yet, letting go of the small flame can feel like dying. That's why the ego clings so tightly to opinions, to recognition, to busyness. It fears that stillness equals erasure. But silence does not erase us. It expands us. In quiet, we stop being a single note and become the whole song. I once asked a student to spend a day without speaking, reading or listening to music, just sitting, walking, breathing. The next evening she told me, "At first it felt like punishment. Then I heard birds I'd never noticed and the sound of my own footsteps. By dusk, I realized the silence had never been outside. It was waiting inside me." The ego cannot make peace with what it cannot control, but awareness doesn't need control. It needs presence. Think of the sky and the clouds. The ego is each cloud, changing, dramatic, temporary. Awareness is the sky, open, patient, vast enough to hold it all. When you stop clinging to the clouds, you realize you were sky all along. As we age, silence becomes less an enemy and more an old friend returning home. The conversations of youth give way to the pauses of wisdom. We begin to understand that it is not necessary to announce everything, not necessary to defend every thought. The quieter we become, the more we hear the rustle of trees, the heartbeat beneath our ribs, the subtle hum of life itself. This is not loneliness. This is union with what has always been here. If you wish to meet your ego with compassion, try this. Sit in stillness for 10 minutes each day. When thoughts arise, "I should be doing something. This is boring. I can't stand this," smile gently and whisper, "I see you." Don't scold or chase them away. Simply recognize them for what they are. Waves returning to the ocean. With time, the waves will calm, not because you force them, but because they realize you are no longer trying to ride them. The ego fears silence because silence dissolves boundaries. But what dissolves is not you. It's everything that kept you separate from peace. In the hush that follows, you will sense something astonishing, an ease that requires nothing, a love that asks for no witness, a freedom that doesn't need a name. And once you've tasted that freedom, the next truth becomes possible. Because to live in peace, you must also learn to let go not only of noise, but of everything you've been holding on to for safety. Let us now step quietly into that lesson, letting go two small words that carry the weight of a lifetime. We hear them often, almost too often, as if they were simple instructions. Just let go. But the truth is, letting go is not something the mind can command. It is something the heart must understand. For most of our lives, we hold tightly. We cling to people, memories, dreams, beliefs, and even our pain, as if our identity might unravel without them. We carry old conversations like stones in our pockets, replay old mistakes like hymns we cannot stop singing. We tell ourselves that to release is to forget, that to loosen our grip is to lose meaning. But in clinging, we exhaust the very life we are trying to preserve. The Buddha compared attachment to a hand grasping a burning branch. The tighter we hold, the more we suffer. Freedom doesn't come from finding something new to hold on to, it comes from learning how to open the hand. Once there was a traveler who wandered through a dense forest, lost for days. When he finally reached a river, he gathered branches and vines to build a raft. With effort and patience, he crossed to the other side. But upon reaching solid ground, he looked at his raft and thought, "This raft saved my life. I must not abandon it." So he hoisted it onto his shoulders and carried it for miles until exhaustion brought him to his knees. A monk passing by saw him and said gently, "The raft served its purpose. Why carry what no longer carries you?" How many of us still carry the rafts of our past beliefs that once protected us, relationships that once sustained us, identities that once defined us, all beautiful, all temporary? To let go is not betrayal. It is gratitude in motion. It says, "Thank you for bringing me here. I no longer need you to take me further." Letting go often begins with grief. The grief of acknowledging that a chapter has closed, that a version of ourselves has ended. But if we allow that grief to flow without resistance, it transforms into something luminous, understanding. The heart begins to see that endings are not punishments, they are invitations. Every falling leaf is proof that release can be graceful. During a retreat in southern India, I met an old potter named Ravi who had lost the strength in his hands. He could no longer shape clay as he once did. When I asked if he missed his craft, he nodded. At first, he said I felt useless. My pots had always been my prayer. But one morning, I watched my apprentice at the wheel. His hands were young, sure, beautiful. And I realized my prayer is still being answered just through another's hands. That is letting go. To rejoice in what continues, even when it no longer continues through you. There is a freedom that can only come from release, a lightness that the world cannot give, and death cannot take away. When we let go of what no longer serves us, space appears. In that space, peace takes its seat. Think of your breath. You cannot inhale without exhaling first. If you try to hold your breath, you suffocate. The same is true for love, identity, and even faith. Life flows through us, not because we cling, but because we allow. In meditation, the Buddha often used the image of a lotus blooming in muddy water. The lotus does not reject the mud. It rises from it. It does not cling to its stem. It trusts its roots, and when it opens completely. No hesitation, no fear of the sun. The lotus does not ask the question, "What if I lose a petal?" It simply opens, because opening is its nature. Letting go is the highest form of faith, not faith in something external, but faith in the unfolding of life itself. It is trusting that what leaves was never meant to stay, and what remains is enough. In my years of guiding meditation, I have seen many faces of letting go. The widow who finally takes off her wedding ring after 30 years, not from indifference, but from peace. The son who forgives a father who never learned how to love. The woman who stops chasing perfection and begins to rest inside her flaws. Each act of release is a small enlightenment, a return to the natural rhythm of existence. If you are holding something tightly tonight, a memory, a regret, a name, try this simple reflection. Close your eyes. Imagine it resting in your open palm. Notice its shape, its weight, the story it carries. Whisper softly, "Thank you." Then, with your next exhale, picture your hand opening. You don't have to throw it away. Just allow it to drift into the flow of life. You'll notice that the hand left open can now receive what the closed hand could not. Letting go does not mean you stop caring. It means you stop controlling. It is not the end of love. It is the purification of love. For love, when freed from possession, becomes compassion, vast, effortless, fearless. And once you begin to live this way, unburdened, unclenched, something miraculous happens. You stop chasing what you already are. You begin to rest in enoughness. The striving softens, the comparisons dissolve, and life at last feels complete, just as it is. Letting go prepares the soil for the next sacred realization that peace is not found in more, but in enough. Let us walk gently now into that wisdom. There comes a quiet season in every life when the heart begins to whisper a single question: have I done enough? It comes not in youth's hurried chase, but in the slow hush of age when our hands once busy with creation now rest more than they reach, and the noise of ambition softens into the music of reflection. We look back at the years and see both the building and the breaking, the giving and the losing, and somewhere between them a gentle truth begins to form. Enough is not a limit, it is a liberation. For most of our lives, we are taught that enough is something distant, something earned. We run toward it, but it keeps retreating. Just one more success, one more approval, one more tomorrow away. The world trains us to believe that satisfaction is found at the finish line, that worth is measured by accumulation. But Buddhism turns this idea upside down. It says the finish line is a mirage. The race itself is the illusion. You were already whole before you began running. Once I met a woman named Clara at a retreat in the English countryside. She had been a teacher for 40 years and had recently retired. I keep waking up feeling useless, she told me. For so long my students needed me. Now no one does. I asked her, when you taught, what did you love most? She smiled softly, watching their faces when they understood something new. I said, and do you still notice that spark in people even now? She thought for a moment and nodded. Yes, I suppose I do. I smiled. Then your work is not finished. It has simply changed its shape. That day she realized that enough does not mean the end of purpose. It means the beginning of peace. There is a saying in the Dhammapada: contentment is the greatest wealth. It does not mean complacency. It means the kind of inner stillness that arises when you stop bargaining with life. It's the realization that the air you breathe right now is not a placeholder for something better. It is the miracle itself. We live in a world addicted to more noise, more goals, more proof that we matter. But every more carries a hidden cost. It steals our ability to rest. We become collectors of achievements, but strangers to tranquility. The mind says, when I reach that place, then I will relax. Yet when that place comes, the mind finds another horizon to chase. The wheel of craving keeps turning, and we keep mistaking its motion for meaning. To stop running is a radical act. It's not laziness, it's awakening. There is an old Japanese proverb: the bamboo that bends is stronger than the oak that resists. The oak spends its life proving its might. The bamboo spends its life in harmony with the wind. When the storm arrives, one breaks, the other bows. Knowing enough is like being bamboo, supple, alive, wise enough to let life move through you rather than against you. In meditation, enough feels like this: you sit. The mind says, not deep enough, not calm enough, not good enough. But then there comes a breath, just one, where you stop believing the voice. You sit anyway. You let the moment be as it is, and in that simple surrender, the silence inside you opens like a flower. That silence is the true measure of sufficiency. I remember my teacher, a serene nun named Sister Lian, who lived in a small monastery outside Hue. Her room was empty, except for a mat, a teapot, and a single lamp. When I asked her if she ever wanted more comfort, she laughed lightly and said, "What could be more comfortable than peace?" To feel enough is to return home to simplicity. It's not about less, it's about clarity. When the heart sees clearly, even a small bowl of rice feels like a feast. A single kind word feels like abundance. A quiet morning feels like eternity. But enoughness is not just about possessions. It's about identity too. We spend so much energy trying to be enough for others: the good parent, the loyal friend, the wise elder, the perfect believer. Yet in the eyes of awakening, you were always enough, because you were always part of life itself. The wave need not be the ocean to be complete. Its existence already expresses the ocean's whole rhythm. If you can pause tonight and take a slow, conscious breath and feel it fully, then you have already touched the heart of contentment. Everything else is decoration. Here is a small practice each morning before rising. Place a hand on your chest and whisper, "This breath is enough. This life is enough. I am enough." At first, the words may feel like foreign language. Say them anyway. Over time, they will begin to sound like truth. When you live from enoughness, gratitude becomes effortless. The eyes soften. The mind stops measuring. You begin to see beauty in the most ordinary things, in the curve of steam from your tea, in the slow blinking of your pet, in the way sunlight touches your wall at dawn. The world, too, begins to soften in response. You find yourself giving more freely because you no longer fear depletion. You listen longer because you no longer rush to be heard. You smile at strangers because you recognize them as travelers on the same road toward enough. And in that state of still sufficient peace, you realize something even deeper: time itself is not running out. It is walking with you step by gentle step, as a companion, not a currency to spend, but a friend to travel beside. So now, let us move softly into that next truth, where we learn how to walk with time, not against it. All our lives we've been told that time is money, something to save, to spend, to manage before it runs out. And so we hurry. We fill our calendars with obligations and our hearts with deadlines. We rise anxious, we sleep tired, and in between we whisper, "If only I had more time." But time is not a currency. It is not ours to hoard. Time is a river, and we are the travelers. It carries not its owners, but its guests. In the stillness of aging, we begin to see what the young cannot yet, that time was never chasing us. It was walking beside us all along. The problem was never its speed. It was our distraction. The Buddha once told a simple truth: do not dwell in the past. Do not dream of the future. Concentrate the mind on the present moment. He wasn't asking us to abandon memory or hope, but to rediscover the only place life actually happens here now. The mind races forward and backward. The body remains. The breath, faithful and ancient, always returns us to now. I remember visiting an old temple in Luang Prabang, where a single monk sat sweeping the courtyard with slow, unhurried strokes. I asked him how long he had been sweeping. He looked up, smiled, and said, "All morning, or maybe all life. There is no difference." He laughed softly and returned to his broom. That laughter carried something profound, the understanding that when you are truly present, time dissolves. Work becomes meditation. Moments lose their walls. We have been taught to fight time, to race it, to fear it, to measure it by what we achieve before it slips away. But when we stop running, time reveals its gentler face. It is not our jailer. It is our teacher. It doesn't steal from us. It reminds us. Every wrinkle, every ache, every season that ends is time whispering, "Look how much you've lived." When we are young, time feels endless. When we are older, it feels precious. But to the awakened heart, time is neither scarce nor infinite. It is intimate. Each moment, perfectly complete, carries eternity within it. Once during a meditation retreat, an elderly man named Howard shared something I have never forgotten. He said, "I used to wake up every morning and check how many days I had left to retirement. Now I'm retired, and I count sunsets instead. But one day, I realized I'd been counting wrong all along. The day I stopped counting, That's when time becomes mine again. To treat time as a companion means to walk with it, not to chase it. When you walk with a friend, you don't rush them. You listen, you share silence, you notice the path. The same is true with time. When we walk slowly through our hours, life begins to reveal its details. The golden hue of morning light, the hum of the refrigerator, the rise and fall of our own breath. Mundane moments become holy because we are finally there to meet them. The world will always try to sell us urgency. Hurry, achieve, upgrade, maximize. But the Dharma invites us to slow down. There is no race to enlightenment, no stopwatch measuring compassion. Even the Buddha sat beneath the Bodhi tree, not to earn time, but to surrender to it. He waited motionless until the moment opened of its own accord. Time, when treated as a friend, begins to share its secrets. It tells us that impermanence is not cruelty, but rhythm. That loss is not punishment, but passage. That endings are not failures, but invitations to begin again differently. One afternoon, while teaching in a small meditation center, I met a woman named Sophia, who was grieving the loss of her husband. She told me, "Time is cruel. It's taken everything I loved." I asked her, if time could take, could it not also give? She frowned. What could it possibly give me? I smiled gently. The chance to love again, not another person perhaps, but life itself. Months later, she returned. Her grief was still there, but softer, shaped into gratitude. She said, "I walk every morning now. I feel him in the wind, in the sun, in the rhythm of my steps. I think time didn't steal him. It transformed the way I find him. That is what time does when you befriend it. It turns loss into intimacy. It teaches you to see presence not as a fleeting privilege, but as the pulse of eternity. Try this tonight before you sleep. Instead of saying, 'Another day gone,' whisper, 'Another day lived.' Notice the difference in your heart. One mourns what has passed, the other honors what was given. You don't need to manage time. You need to meet it. Sit with it like an old companion who has waited patiently for your attention. Ask it questions. Listen for answers. It may remind you that the rush to make meaning is unnecessary, that meaning grows naturally in stillness like moss along a riverbank. The gift of walking beside time is that it softens your grip on everything else. You no longer panic at birthdays or fear the changing face in the mirror. You realize that age is not theft, but evidence proof that you have lived, loved, and learned. Time is not leaving you. It is accompanying you home. And as that realization ripens, another truth blossoms quietly within it, that peace is not in being right or winning arguments, but in being kind, in choosing love over pride, presence over victory. Let us continue now into that lesson, the next gentle doorway on this path of awakening. When we are young, being right feels like power. We spend our days collecting proofs, opinions, and victories, tiny medals for the ego. We argue to be heard, to be respected, to be seen. We think that correctness will protect us from uncertainty. But as the years deepen, something shifts. The older heart no longer seeks to win. It seeks to understand. For what is the use of being right if it costs you your peace? The Buddha once said, "Hatred is never overcome by hatred. By love alone is hatred overcome." The same is true of arguments. You may win the debate, but lose the connection. You may prove your point, but harden your heart. And what have you truly gained? There is a story told in the Zen tradition. Two monks were standing by a flagpole watching the flag flap in the wind. One said, "The flag is moving." The other replied, "No, the wind is moving." They argued for hours until their master came by. He said, "Neither the flag nor the wind moves. It is your mind that moves." And in that moment, both monks fell silent. They realized they had been debating shadows missing the light. How often do we do the same? We argue not to learn, but to defend the illusion that we are separate. We confuse loudness for truth and pride for strength, but kindness, quiet, humble, effortless kindness has a power that no argument can touch. I once met a man named Luis, a former lawyer, who in his 60s had left everything behind to live near a monastery. "I spent 40 years being right," he told me, "and not one night did I sleep in peace." When I asked what changed him, he smiled. "One day in court, an old woman wept as I won a case against her. I was correct by the law, but in that moment, I felt something break inside me. I realized I'd rather lose and remain kind than win and become empty." It is not easy to unlearn the habit of proving. The ego finds nourishment in validation, but as compassion matures, it reveals a greater intelligence, the kind that listens instead of reacts, that chooses silence over sharpness, that values harmony over being right. Once I watched a mother and daughter quarrel during a family retreat. The daughter accused, the mother defended. Back and forth they went until the mother suddenly grew quiet. She took her daughter's hand and said, "You may be right, my love, but I'd rather hold your hand than hold my position." The entire room went still. Kindness had entered where logic had failed. That is the moment wisdom begins, when we stop defending the self and start protecting the love between selves. The Buddha taught that clinging to opinions is one of the deepest roots of suffering. He called it Ditthi Upadana, attachment to views. It doesn't mean we must have no beliefs. It means we must not let our beliefs own us. To be free is not to abandon truth, but to hold it lightly, knowing that even truth wears different faces in different light. Sometimes being right blinds us to what is real. You can be right about the argument, but wrong about the tone. You can be right about the facts, but wrong about the timing. And you can be right about what was said, but wrong about what was needed. Wisdom is knowing when the heart must step ahead of the intellect. I remember a teacher once saying, "Would you rather be a sword or a bridge?" The sword cuts clean, but always divides. The bridge endures weight and weather, yet it connects what once was separate. The sword gets applause, the bridge gets footsteps, but one destroys, the other unites. The path of awakening is the path of bridges. You can test this for yourself in the smallest moments. The next time someone disagrees with you, pause before speaking. Feel the urge to defend rise in your chest, then let it soften. Ask yourself, do I want to be right or do I want to be free? Then respond from that freedom. You may find that no words are needed at all. Being kind does not mean being silent when truth is required. It means letting truth serve healing, not ego. It means speaking with compassion even when correction is needed. It means realizing that every person you meet, the rude clerk, the stubborn relative, the stranger who cuts you off in traffic, is fighting unseen battles just as you are. The wise do not walk into every argument that invites them. They understand that peace is not cowardice, it is clarity. When you see clearly, you no longer waste energy proving the sky is blue. You simply stand under it and smile. As we grow older, we begin to notice the futility of trying to change others by force. Life teaches us that people don't awaken because they are shamed or defeated. They awaken because they are loved. The gentlest teacher is compassion. So let kindness be your intelligence. Let gentleness be your argument, When the choice arises between being right and being kind, remember that being right ends a conversation, but kindness begins one. And when you choose kindness long enough, something extraordinary happens, presence deepens. The noise of conflict fades, and what remains is simple, luminous awareness, the kind that doesn't need to fix, prove, or perfect anything. That is where true peace lives. Let us now step quietly into that next truth, one that blossoms from kindness itself, the art of being fully here. In a world obsessed with doing, presence is a forgotten art. We are constantly invited to plan, to prepare, to improve, but rarely to be. We live half a step ahead of our own breath, always chasing the next thing, the next task, the next conversation, the next version of ourselves. Yet life, in its quiet wisdom, never stops reminding us through loss, through love, through impermanence, that all we truly have is now. Presence is not a skill to be mastered. It is a homecoming. The Buddha once said, "The past is gone. The future is not yet here. There is only one moment for you to live, and that is the present." It is such a simple truth that our minds almost refuse to believe it. We search for something more complex, some secret practice. But the secret is not hidden. It is in your next inhale, waiting to be noticed. Presence is not silence of sound. It is silence of resistance. When you are present, you stop wrestling with what should be and start embracing what is. The mind softens. The heart expands. Time stops being a measurement and becomes a melody. I once visited an elderly gardener named Arun who lived at the edge of a forest in Sri Lanka. Every morning he watered the same small patch of wildflowers with extraordinary care. When I asked why he did it so slowly, he said, "Because if I hurry, I miss their faces." His words struck me as deeply as any sutra. Presence, I realized, is seeing the face of life before it changes shape. To be present is to meet the world without a story. No past to defend, no future to control, only this eternal instant of aliveness. It is the space where the mind stops narrating and begins to experience. The sound of rain becomes music. The warmth of tea becomes prayer. The sight of your own hands becomes a miracle. There is a story from the Buddha's life that captures this beautifully. One day, a man asked him, "What do you and your monks practice?" The Buddha replied, "We sit, we walk, we eat," the man said. "But everyone sits, walks, and eats." The Buddha smiled. "Yes, but when we sit, we know we are sitting. When we walk, we know we are walking. When we eat, we know we are eating. That is presence awareness infused with gentleness. You see, most of us live like ghosts haunting our own lives. We are there in body, but absent in spirit, eating while thinking, listening while planning, walking while remembering. Our bodies are here, but our minds are everywhere else. It's no wonder peace feels so distant. Peace can't find you when you're not home. To return to presence, you must slow down enough to feel what has always been here. Try this. Take a single slow breath and truly feel it. Feel the coolness entering your nostrils, the chest expanding the air, leaving your lips. That small act is a reunion with life itself. Presence is also the deepest form of love. When you give someone your full attention, you tell them without words, "You matter, you are safe, I am here." You don't have to fix their pain or fill the silence. Your being becomes enough. And sometimes that silent being heals more than 1,000 perfect sentences. There was once a widow named May who came to my meditation class, her grief still raw. She said, "Everyone keeps trying to comfort me with advice. but their words just make the ache sharper. I asked her, "What do you truly need?" She paused, then whispered, "Just someone to sit beside me without turning away." So we sat quietly for a long time. The tears came, then softened. Later, she said, "For the first time, I didn't feel alone." That is the power of presence. It turns isolation into communion. To be present is to honor impermanence. When you watch a sunset without photographing it, when you listen to a friend without rehearsing your reply, when you taste your meal without distraction, you are bowing to the fleeting nature of all things. You are saying, "This moment is enough. I do not need to hold it to be blessed by it." The Buddha called this awareness sati mindfulness. It is the foundation of liberation, the root of compassion. Because when you are fully here, you can finally see life as it is, not as you wish it to be, not as you fear it to be, but simply as it unfolds. And in that seeing, something miraculous happens. Suffering softens, gratitude blooms, and joy, once buried beneath busyness, rises quietly to the surface. In the end, presence is not about escaping life's noise. It's about finding silence within the noise. It's realizing that peace doesn't depend on external calm. It lives in the awareness that notices even chaos. So if your mind feels restless tonight, if thoughts run wild and the heart feels heavy, try not to chase them away. Instead, return to this. In this moment, I am breathing. In this breath, I am alive. And that is enough. The gift of presence is not that it changes the world, it changes the way you see the world. And through that, seeing, everything softens, everything glows. As we rest in this quiet space of being, one last truth emerges, one that dissolves the illusion of separateness and reveals the vastness of life itself. It is the humbling, liberating realization that you are not the center of the universe. And that is what makes you free. Let us walk gently now into that final reflection. There comes a tender hour in every life when the ego finally grows quiet enough for you to hear something older than thought. It is the whisper that says, "You were never meant to be the center, you were meant to belong." We spend the first half of life trying to make the world orbit us, our goals, our desires, our pain. We want to be recognized, remembered, justified. But the universe has its own rhythm older than our stories. It doesn't revolve around us. It dances with us. And when we begin to see that difference, a soft freedom arises, the relief of not needing to control the stars. Once the Buddha was asked, "Who rules the world?" he smiled and replied, "No one rules it. It unfolds." Those 3 words carry the medicine of awakening, the release of ownership. The rain does not fall for you. The sunrise does not perform for you. Yet both include you completely. There was a monk in China named Li Shan who used to bow to every passerby, children, beggars, merchants alike. When asked why, he said, "Each face is a mirror of the same moon." He understood what philosophy alone could never teach. The self is not a throne, but a reflection. The more you bow, the more sky you discover above you. This realization doesn't make you small, it makes you vast. When the eye dissolves, the horizon widens. You stop guarding your little fire and realize you are the warmth in every flame. You stop defending your drop of water and realize you are the tide itself. I once met a woman who tended a lighthouse on a forgotten coast. She lived alone for decades, keeping the light alive through storms no one witnessed. When I asked if she ever felt invisible, she said, "Perhaps. But the light doesn't shine to be seen. It shines so others may find their way." That is the humility of awakening to shine not for approval, but for love. The doctrine of anatta non-self is not a denial of existence, but an invitation to transparency. Imagine your identity as a window. When it's dirty with pride, fear, and comparison, you see only your reflection. When it's clear the whole sky passes through, you are still there, but as openness, not obstruction. And in that clarity, compassion is born, because when you're no longer obsessed with being the center, you begin to feel the heartbeat of others as your own. The sparrow's hunger matters. The child's laughter matters. The stranger's sorrow touches you before words can form. You begin to live not from the self, but through it, like wind through bamboo music, through strings. If you've ever watched the ocean at dusk, you know this feeling, waves rising and falling, each one unique, yet none separate from the sea. That is who you are, a momentary gesture of something eternal. You don't have to hold the ocean together, it holds you. There is peace in anonymity. There is holiness in ordinariness. You no longer need to be exceptional to feel sacred. The leaf doesn't strive to be noticed. It simply photosynthesizes, and in doing so feeds the world. So tonight, if you feel small, let that smallness free you. Let it remind you that every breath you take is shared with trees, with oceans, with generations unborn. You are woven into a tapestry too vast for any single thread to claim ownership. The relief of insignificance is actually the beginning of infinite belonging. When this truth settles into the heart, gratitude blooms effortlessly. You no longer ask, "Why me?" You whisper, "Why not me?" and bow. You bow to impermanence, to connection to the unfathomable grace of existing at all. To realize you are not the center of the universe is to finally step into your rightful place within it, not as ruler, not as spectator, but as witness and participant in one endless unfolding. That is the beauty of being small, under an infinite sky. You can finally see the whole sky. When you sit quietly enough, you can feel it, a rhythm older than your heartbeat, a pulse that doesn't begin or end. It moves through you, around you, as you. That is the breath of the universe, and every inhale you take is its whisper, saying, "We are one motion." We often imagine the divine as something distant, a God above clouds a light at the end of some long path. But what if divinity is the air itself moving in and out of your lungs? What if the miracle isn't in reaching heaven, but in realizing heaven is already breathing through you? The Buddha compared existence to a flame passed from candle to candle. The fire changes forms, yet the light remains continuous. In the same way, consciousness flows through countless lives, countless moments, never truly beginning, never ending. You are not a single candle, you are the continuity of light itself. I once met a young sculptor who told me, "When I carve stone, I feel like I'm uncovering something that was already there." I smiled and said, "That's what the universe does with us. Life chisels, smooths, and shapes us, until what's hidden, awareness itself, begins to shine. The pain, the joy, the waiting, all are strokes of the same cosmic artist. To live as if the universe breathes through you is to trust the rhythm of existence. You no longer need to force outcomes. You align with flow. You notice how the tide doesn't argue with the moon, how the seasons do not hurry, how even decay has its place in creation. This awareness transforms ordinary acts into sacred rituals. Washing dishes becomes communion with water. Walking becomes a dialogue with gravity. Listening becomes prayer. You stop asking life to perform for you and start performing with it in harmony, not hierarchy. There was a farmer named Tao who lost his crops to flood one year. His neighbors pitied him, saying such bad luck. He only replied, "Maybe." The next season, the flood left fertile silt, and his harvest doubled. The villagers cheered. "Such good luck." He smiled again. "Maybe." Tao had learned the language of the universe, non-resistance. He didn't demand the river stop. He learned to plant differently. When you realize the universe breathes through you, control gives way to curiosity. Every moment becomes an invitation. What is life showing me now? Even pain becomes a messenger, not an enemy. Even uncertainty becomes space for discovery. You begin to see yourself less as a person navigating life and more as life exploring itself through a person. The tree doesn't separate itself from the forest. It is the forest expressing itself in one form. So too, you are the cosmos experimenting with consciousness, a brief flowering of eternity. At night, when you rest, feel the breath entering you, leaving you. Notice how it never asks permission. It comes, it goes. The same wind that stirs galaxies stirs your chest. The same stillness that holds planets holds your dreams. You are not merely in the universe. You are the universe remembering itself. This realization softens everything. Anger dissolves into empathy. Fear turns into wonder. The need to prove yourself fades because you see you were never separate from the source you sought. And as you breathe, now know this: the universe does not breathe for you or through you alone. It breathes as all things: the bird in flight, the newborn's cry, the falling leaf, the dying star. To recognize this unity is the essence of awakening. So tonight, when you take your final breath before sleep, let it not be a sigh of exhaustion, but of belonging. Feel the vastness inhale and exhale with you. Let gratitude rise like morning light. Whisper softly, "I am not alone. I never was. I never will be." And with that knowing rest as the universe rests within itself, everything you love will one day change, and that is not a tragedy. It is the pulse of existence itself. We spend so much of our lives trying to hold on to people, to moments, to identities that made us feel safe. We photograph sunsets, cling to memories, trace our wrinkles in mirrors, as if by remembering what was, we could stop what is. But impermanence is not the enemy of beauty. It is the reason beauty exists at all. Imagine a flower that never wilted, a song that never ended, a night sky that never faded into dawn. There would be no awe, no tenderness, no appreciation, only monotony. The heart awakens through endings. The Buddha called this truth anicca, the law of impermanence. He said all conditioned things are like a dream, a phantom, a bubble. At first, that sounds somber, even cruel. But look closer. A dream is fleeting, yes, but it's also wondrous. It carries light for a moment, then releases it back to the whole. Life is exactly that, a moving constellation of moments too delicate to possess, too sacred to freeze. I once met a man named Kato, a woodcarver from Japan. His workshop was filled with shavings of cedar, their scent sharp and sweet. He spent months carving a single statue, only to burn it ceremonially when it was finished. When I asked him why, he said, "Because beauty is not the wood, it's the giving." He smiled. The fire reminds me not to mistake form for essence. That is the heart of impermanence, knowing that all forms are temporary expressions of what never dies. Our grief, when seen through this lens, becomes gentler. The people we've lost have not vanished, they've changed form. The laughter that once filled a room becomes the wind through trees. The warmth of a mother's hand becomes sunlight across your skin. The love remains, only its shape transforms. The problem is not that things end. The problem is that we resist their ending. We grip the river as if it were a rope, forgetting it's meant to flow. But when we release the need for permanence, peace begins to whisper through the cracks of loss. In a monastery in northern Thailand, I watched monks sweep fallen leaves every dawn. By noon, the ground was covered again. I asked one of them, "Why sweep if the leaves will always fall?" He smiled. "Because the sweeping is the practice, not the result." That simple answer became a teaching I never forgot. Impermanence is not something to fix. It's something to dance with. The truth is, impermanence is love in motion. Because we know time is brief, we hold our children tighter. Because we know words may be our last, we speak them more tenderly. Because we know moments cannot last, we live them more vividly. Every ending deepens the beginning that follows. There's a Zen saying, "The snowflake never falls in the wrong place." Each loss, each change, each letting go is precisely where it needs to be, not as punishment, but as evolution. Look at your life. The jobs you lost, the people who left, the dreams that dissolved. Did they not clear space for what truly mattered? To emerge, impermanence is not chaos. It's choreography. It rearranges the stage so that truth can step forward. So tonight, instead of fearing what will fade, bow to it. Bow to the breath that arrives, only to leave. Bow to the day that ends, so the night can sing. Bow to your own reflection, knowing it too will one day vanish, but the awareness behind it will not. Because impermanence is not a thief. It's the quiet teacher reminding us nothing is meant to be held, only honored. And when we honor what passes, we begin to glimpse what endures, the silent, luminous awareness that watches all change, but never changes itself. So take this moment, just as it is. Don't grasp, don't push. Let it pass through you, like wind through reeds. Because what you allow to move freely through your hands leaves blessings in its wake. The art of impermanence is not losing less. It is loving more deeply, more presently, more freely, because you finally understand that love itself is what remains when all else has moved on. Let that realization rest in your heart like a flame that does not burn but warms. For as one moment dissolves into another, so too does sorrow dissolve into peace. And as we bow to change, a deeper wisdom arises, one that asks not only what passes, but also what watches. Let us walk quietly into that next reflection. There is a stillness beneath everything, beneath the noise of thought, beneath the storm of emotion, beneath the endless movement of becoming. That stillness is not something you must create. It is what you already are. Most of us live like waves, crashing and retreating, rising and falling in response to the winds of circumstance. We identify with the wave, its height, its force, its temporary glory. We say, "I am angry, I am sad, I am broken." But what if you are not the wave at all? What if you are the ocean, vast, silent, unshaken, watching each wave rise and fall within you? This is the ancient teaching of awareness, to recognize the watcher beyond the waves. I once met a monk in Myanmar named Ashen, who spent over 30 years meditating beside a river. When I asked him what he had learned, he said, "The river taught me how to stop drowning. I didn't understand at first," he explained. The current of thought never stops, but peace is not found by stopping the current. It's found by remembering that you are not in the water, you are the sky reflected upon it. It took me years to truly hear what he meant. We spend our lives trying to fix, fight, or flee the contents of our mind. But awareness is not about controlling the waves. It's about realizing you are the space in which they rise. The Buddha once said, Just as the ocean has one taste, the taste of salt, so too does my teaching have one taste, the taste of freedom. Freedom here means the freedom from mistaken identity, the freedom of knowing you are the witness, not the story. Imagine sitting by the shore on a windy day. The waves are wild, chaotic, unpredictable. Yet beneath them, the deep water does not move. If you could dive beneath the surface, you'd find perfect stillness. That stillness exists within you at this very moment, no matter how loud the world becomes. When you begin to live from that place of awareness, life transforms. Pain still comes, but it doesn't pierce you the same way. Anger arises, but it passes through like thunder across a vast sky. You realize that emotions like weather are visitors, not the landscape itself. There was once a woman I met during a silent retreat. Her husband had passed away only a few months earlier, and grief clung to her like a heavy fog. One morning during meditation, tears streamed down her face. Afterward, she whispered, "I can't stop them." I told her softly, "You don't have to. Just watch the rain fall. You are the mountain." In that moment, her breathing slowed. She said, "For the first time, the sadness doesn't scare me. That's what awareness does. It doesn't erase pain. It dissolves the fear of pain. To live as the watcher is not detachment. It is intimacy without drowning. You feel everything fully, but you no longer confuse yourself with the feeling. You become like a candle, steady, luminous, unafraid of the darkness around it. The mind, when left unobserved, is like a room full of mirrors, reflecting reflections endlessly until you can't tell what's real. Awareness opens the window. Suddenly, the mirrors lose their power. You see that you were never trapped inside them. The light was always coming from you. The Buddha once compared this realization to waking from a dream. In the dream, everything feels urgent, the chase, the fear, the longing. But when you wake, the dream dissolves, and you smile gently, because you understand it was only a play of mind. Awareness is that waking, and the beauty of this awakening is that it doesn't make you cold or distant. Quite the opposite, it makes you tender. When you know you are the sky, you stop judging the clouds. You allow them to pass. You begin to love even the storms, because you see they too are expressions of the same vastness that you are. When you truly rest in awareness, silence ceases to be emptiness. It becomes presence. You begin to see how miraculous it is simply to witness life unfolding moment by moment without clinging or pushing away. Tonight, as you sit in stillness, notice the waves of your mind. Some may be gentle, others violent. Watch them all rise and fall. Don't try to calm them. Just remember, you are the ocean beneath. The waves can never drown what they arise from. In that recognition, peace is no longer something you chase. It's something you remember. The watcher has been there all along, silent, patient, infinite. Every thought, every feeling, every lifetime has passed before its gaze. It never once turned away. So rest now, not as the doer, not as the dreamer, but as the watcher, the timeless witness of it all. And when you wake tomorrow, carry this knowing, like a lantern. The waves will rise, the waves will fall, but I am the sea. From that stillness, another truth emerges, one about the subtle art of compassion, the bridge between your inner stillness and the suffering of others. Let us walk gently toward that next reflection. If awareness is the sky, then compassion is the rain. It falls naturally, touching everything, without asking who deserves it. When we awaken to the truth of who we are, compassion ceases to be a virtue we practice and becomes the fragrance of our being. The Buddha once said, As a mother would protect her only child with her life, so should one cultivate a boundless heart toward all beings. This boundless heart is not born from effort. It blooms when the walls of separation crumble. Many believe compassion means pity, but pity stands on higher ground, looking down. True compassion kneels. It looks into the eyes of suffering and says, "I see myself here." I remember visiting a hospice where an elderly nun named Sister June cared for the dying. Her voice was quiet, her movements deliberate. She would sit beside each patient and hold their hand in silence. When I asked what she said to them, she smiled gently. "Nothing. Words cannot ease what must be felt. I just stay until the fear leaves." Her presence was medicine, not because she had the answers, but because she refused to turn away. That is compassion, the courage to stay. Compassion doesn't mean we must carry everyone's pain. It means we allow their pain to touch our heart without hardening it. It's the art of remaining open in a world that teaches us to close. There was once a monk named Phop Hai who lived in the mountains of Vietnam. One evening, a thief broke into his hut, only to find there was nothing to steal. Seeing the thief shivering in the cold, the monk offered him his blanket. The thief, startled, took it and fled. As he watched him disappear into the night, the monk whispered, "If only I could give him the moon." When you live with compassion, you give even when there is nothing left to give, because you understand that generosity is not about possessions, but perception. You see the divine in every being, even the one who wounds you. And this kind of love is not weak, it is fearless. The ego seeks safety in judgment. The awakened heart finds strength in understanding. It doesn't mean we approve of harm, but we refuse to let hatred grow roots in our soil. There's a story told of the Buddha's cousin Devadatta, who out of jealousy tried many times to harm him, even sending an enraged elephant to trample him. When the beast approached, the Buddha simply stood still, radiating loving kindness. The animal stopped, knelt, and bowed its head. Love disarmed violence not through force, but through fearlessness. That is the secret of compassion. It protects, not by building walls, but by dissolving them. And yet compassion begins not outward, but inward. You cannot hold the world tenderly if you refuse to hold yourself the same way. Many people speak kindly to others while waging silent wars against themselves. But until you forgive your own humanness, your mistakes, your fears, your imperfections, compassion remains incomplete. Sit for a moment and place your hand over your heart. Feel its pulse. It has never missed a beat for you, even when you hated yourself. That is life's compassion for you, constant and unconditional. So tonight, if you carry regret or shame, breathe softly and whisper to yourself, "May I be at peace. May I be kind to this body, this mind, this story." Do not rush the healing. Let compassion arrive like dawn, slowly, silently, but inevitably. Because compassion is not something you create, it is something you uncover. It was buried beneath judgment, but it was never lost. When you begin to see others through this lens, even suffering becomes sacred. The angry man, the fearful child, the cruel stranger, each is a being trapped in their own storm, yearning for shelter. Compassion does not excuse their actions, but it understands their pain. And in that understanding, healing begins. Imagine standing on a bridge between two shores. One shore is your suffering. The other is the suffering of the world. Compassion is what allows you to stand in the middle, connected to both without drowning in either. In that balance, the world becomes softer. The news hurts less because you see through it to the collective ache of humanity. Forgiveness becomes easier because you understand we all stumble in the dark searching for light. And when you live with compassion, even the smallest act, a smile, a kind word, a moment of listening, becomes a sacred offering. The world doesn't need more heroes. It needs more hearts unafraid to feel. As Thich Nhat Hanh once said, compassion is a verb. It breathes, moves, and acts through you. And each time you choose understanding over judgment, patience over anger, presence over avoidance, you become that verb in motion, love made visible. So tonight, as you rest, ask yourself, where can I soften? Who can I forgive? How can I bring warmth where there was once distance? Compassion is not a path we walk to enlightenment. It is enlightenment in motion. It is the bridge that connects your awakening to the awakening of all beings. And when you cross it, you realize there is no other shore. There is only love meeting itself in endless forms. From this boundless heart, we move toward the next reflection, one that asks not just how to love others, but how to live with purpose amid impermanence. For much of life, we are taught that purpose must be found as if it were a treasure buried somewhere out there, waiting for the worthy. We chase it through jobs, titles, accomplishments, relationships, hoping that somewhere the feeling of enough will finally settle into our bones. But true purpose is not something to be found. It is something to be lived. The Buddha once said, "Your work is to discover your work, and then, with all your heart, to give yourself to it." Notice, he didn't say to own it or to define it, but simply to give. Because real purpose is never about possession. It's about participation. When you live with awareness, purpose ceases to be a single destination. It becomes a current, quiet, steady moving through everything you do. Washing dishes, comforting a friend, tending to the garden, all become sacred when done with intention and attention. I once met an old calligrapher named Sato, who had spent 50 years painting the same word mu, which means emptiness. When I asked him why, he said, "Because each time I write it, I disappear a little more, and what remains writes better than I ever could." That is the essence of purpose without possession, to allow life to work through you rather than for you. Most people confuse purpose with achievement. They ask, "What impact will I make?" But the wiser question is, how sincerely can I live a single act of presence, a kind word, a steady breath, a silent forgiveness ripples farther than any monument of ambition. In the West, purpose is often tied to outcome. We say, "I must create something that lasts." But Buddhism reminds us what matters is not longevity, but authenticity. Even the most perfect sand mandala created by monks over weeks of meticulous work is swept away moments after completion. Its destruction is the lesson. Meaning lies not in the permanence of the art, but in the mindfulness of the making. If you have ever cared for someone, a child, a parent, a friend in pain, you already know this truth. The purpose of love is not to guarantee outcomes. It is to be fully with what is moment by moment, with your whole heart open. One morning during a retreat in Nepal, a participant asked our teacher, "How do I know if I'm living my purpose?" The teacher smiled, pointed to the sunrise and said, "Does the sun know its purpose? It just shines." When we stop grasping for purpose, purpose begins to reveal itself in the ordinary, in the way we speak, listen, breathe, forgive. It becomes less about what we do and more about how we do it. Even now, in this very breath, you are living purpose if you are awake to it. The danger of possession is that it turns purpose into identity, my calling, my mission, my legacy. But when the ego takes ownership, the soul becomes secondary. True purpose does not inflate the self, it dissolves it. I once knew a physician named Aaron who worked in a small mountain village. He treated patients for decades, rarely paid, often exhausted. One evening, I asked him if he ever felt unappreciated. He smiled gently. Sometimes. But then I remember healing doesn't belong to me. I am only one instrument in the great orchestra of compassion. When I forget myself, the music plays clearer. This humility is what transforms work into worship. The moment you stop needing credit, your service becomes infinite. You realize you were never the source, only the channel. So how do we live this way? By aligning with intention rather than ambition. Intention says, may my actions lessen suffering. Ambition says, may my actions prove my worth. One frees you, the other binds you. As the Buddha taught, right livelihood and right intention are part of the Eightfold Path, not because we must live perfectly, but because our daily work can become a vehicle for awakening. A baker who kneads dough with mindfulness, a teacher who listens deeply, a gardener who plants with care, each is fulfilling the same purpose to serve life consciously. When your heart becomes still enough, you'll notice that purpose is not a question you answer, it's a melody you remember. It has always been playing underneath your striving, softly calling you home to the simplicity of being alive and aware. Maybe your purpose today is not to build or fix or achieve anything grand. Maybe it's to sit quietly with your breath, to love someone without condition, to water a plant and watch it lean toward light. And if you ever feel lost, remember this: the universe itself has no fixed purpose. Yet everything within it contributes to the harmony of existence. The stars do not seek meaning, they shine. The river does not seek recognition, it flows. You too are part of that same flow. Purpose is not what you find at the end of your path. It's the way you walk it. So walk gently without needing to own or define your contribution. Trust that your sincerity is enough. For when the heart acts without possession, every moment becomes sacred, and every breath becomes purpose fulfilled. From this clarity of doing without grasping another truth arises how to live in joy, not as escape, but as gratitude. We often imagine joy as sunlight and sorrow, as shadow opposites locked in an eternal struggle. But look closely, and you'll see the two are not enemies. They are threads of the same tapestry, each revealing the depth of the other. Joy is not the denial of sorrow. It is the song that emerges from it. For much of our lives, we chase joy as if it were a prize to be earned. We postpone it. I'll be happy when this changes, when I succeed, when I heal. But joy doesn't wait for perfect conditions. It arises when we stop demanding perfection from life. It is what remains when the mind grows quiet enough to notice what has always been here. The Buddha once said, "When you realize how perfect everything is, you will tilt your head back and laugh at the sky." This perfection doesn't mean life is flawless. It means that even its flaws are part of a greater harmony, the same way thunder completes the rain. I once met an old musician named Gabriel who played the cello in the local park every morning. His hands trembled with age, but his music carried a warmth that drew even the pigeons closer. I asked him once what kept him playing. He smiled, "Because I've learned that sadness and joy use the same strings. When I play, I can't tell which is which, and I think that's the point. That perhaps is the secret to deep joy. It doesn't exclude pain. It transforms it. True joy is not the loud, glittering kind the world sells us. It is quiet, like a candle in a dark room. It doesn't deny the darkness. It simply refuses to let it reign. It whispers, "Even here, there is light." The Buddha taught that mudita sympathetic joy is one of the four immeasurables. It is the joy that arises not from possession, but from participation. To feel happiness for another's success, to delight in another's beauty, to celebrate another's peace. This is joy purified of envy, a joy that multiplies instead of divides. But to reach such joy, we must first learn to sit with our own sorrow. There was once a woman named Alara who came to a monastery after losing her son. For months, she sat in meditation, but her tears would not stop. One evening, an elder monk placed a candle before her and said, "Every flame needs darkness to be seen." She understood then her grief was not proof of failure, it was proof of love. When you allow sorrow to breathe without resistance, joy returns not as pleasure, but as presence. To be alive is to hold both the ache and the wonder, the wound and the healing in the same trembling hands. You don't have to choose between them. You only have to stop believing that one must erase the other. Joy in its truest form is not about what happens. It's about how deeply you allow yourself to feel what happens. It's the quiet gratitude that says, "Even in loss, I am alive. Even in endings, there is something beginning." When you begin to live this way, even small things shimmer with meaning. The way sunlight filters through the leaves, the taste of warm tea after rain, the laugh of a stranger that makes you smile without reason. Joy is not rare, attention is. There is a story from the Zen tradition about a monk who was chased by a tiger. Running for his life, he fell off a cliff and managed to grab a vine. Below him, another tiger waited. As he hung there, he noticed a wild strawberry growing beside him. He plucked it, tasted it, and whispered, "How sweet." That is joy not in escape, but in surrender. To taste joy is to be fully here, even when you don't know how the story ends. It is to trust the unfolding, to love the moment, to see that even sorrow carries seeds of awakening. As you grow older, joy changes its shape. It becomes quieter, gentler, less about excitement, more about gratitude. You no longer need everything to go your way. You just need to see the beauty that has always been walking beside you. Tonight, take a slow breath and whisper thanks, not because everything is easy, but because you are still capable of feeling, of noticing, of being moved. That is joy. And when you carry that joy, it ripples. It becomes your offering to the world, your quiet resistance against despair. Because joy, like compassion, is contagious. One smile, one moment of wonder, one soft breath of gratitude, that's how light spreads. So remember, this sorrow deepens you, joy expands you. Together, they make you whole. And from that wholeness, another truth arises, that peace is not a place we reach, but a way we walk. We often speak of peace as if it lies somewhere ahead of us at the end of the road, after the struggle, once everything has fallen into place. We tell ourselves, "I'll be at peace when I retire, when my children are safe, when my past no longer haunts me." But peace is not waiting somewhere beyond the horizon. Peace is the ground beneath your feet, here and now, quietly patient, waiting for you to stop running. The Buddha once said, "There is no path to peace. Peace is the path." At first, this seems like a riddle, but when the heart slows down enough, the truth of it unfolds. Peace is not what you reach after effort, it's what you touch the moment effort ends. Imagine a lake at dawn. Its surface mirrors the sky so perfectly that you cannot tell where water ends and heaven begins. Then a stone is thrown and ripples scatter the reflection. We spend most of our lives chasing stillness by trying to smooth the ripples, pushing thoughts away, fixing problems, controlling every detail. But the lake doesn't become calm because it conquers movement. It becomes calm when it stops reacting. Peace is that non-reactivity, not indifference, but balance. I once met a teacher in northern India who said peace is not the absence of noise, but the absence of resistance. She lived beside a busy marketplace, yet her small home felt like a sanctuary. Children shouted, bells rang, carts clattered, and still her eyes held the serenity of a forest pool. When I asked how she did it, she smiled. I stopped demanding silence from the world. I found it inside instead. That's when I understood the world doesn't disturb our peace. Our attachment to how the world should be does. Peace is the gentle art of allowing. It's not about escaping life, but embracing it with open hands. It's the moment you breathe out and stop arguing with reality. There's a story of two monks walking through the forest. One says, "I need to find peace." The other replies, "Stop looking for it." The first frowns, "Then how will I find it?" The second smiles. "When you stop trying, you'll see you never lost it." Peace has always been here, hidden beneath our noise, like the sky behind clouds, unchanged by the storm. When you begin to live from that space, you stop fighting every emotion that arises. Anger comes, and you watch it. Fear visits, and you breathe with it. Grief moves through you like rain. You don't resist. You allow. And in that allowing, the heart becomes vast enough to hold everything without breaking. This kind of peace is not passive. It's active surrender, a strength so soft it cannot be broken. It allows you to walk through chaos without losing your center, to speak truth without hatred, to face loss without despair. I once asked an elderly monk, "How do you remain peaceful when so much suffering exists?" He answered, "Peace is not the opposite of suffering. It's the awareness that holds both. That awareness is your true refuge. The world will continue to change. Joy will come and go. People will arrive and leave. Your body will age and ache. You cannot anchor yourself to permanence, but you can anchor yourself to presence. When you are fully present, even pain softens because it no longer defines you. At its core, peace is not a state of mind, but a state of being, the natural rhythm of existence when we stop interfering with it. Just as water finds stillness when left alone, the heart returns to peace when we stop stirring it. So how do we live in peace amid movement? Begin small. Take a breath before you speak. Pause before you react. Listen without preparing your reply. Feel the ground beneath your feet, and remember, you are standing on the same earth that has held every saint, every sinner, every seeker before you. The peace they touched is not gone. It flows through you now, and when you fall as you will, don't judge yourself. Return gently. Peace is patient. It never punishes, never withholds. It simply waits open-armed for your attention to return home. Sometimes peace doesn't feel like bliss. Sometimes it's quiet acceptance, a soft exhale after the storm. Sometimes it's the strength to keep walking through uncertainty with grace. If joy is sunlight, peace is the moon's subtle, reflective constant, even when unseen. You don't create it. You align with it. So tonight, as you sit in the hush between heartbeats, remember you don't have to reach peace. You only have to stop leaving it. And from that stillness, something deeper begins to stir, a truth about presence that endures even when peace seems lost, the wisdom of patience. Patience is not waiting. It is the quiet strength of trust. In the modern world, we are trained to move quickly, to answer, achieve, react, and resolve. We measure life in deadlines and victories in the illusion that faster means better. But life does not move by our command. A seed does not bloom because we demand it to. A heart does not heal because we rush it. And the soul does not awaken on a schedule. The Buddha once said, "If you try to rush your understanding, you miss it, like shaking a tree to make it blossom sooner." Patience, then, is the art of moving in rhythm with life instead of against it. I once met a potter named Aaron, who created the most exquisite bowls in silence. He told me, "When I first began, I used to hurry the drying process by the fire. The clay cracked every time. I learned that beauty cannot be forced. It must be allowed." How often do we crack ourselves by rushing what needs time to unfold? Patience is not passive. It's not sitting idly, waiting for luck to change. It is an active practice, a deep knowing that life ripens in its own season, and our only task is to tend the soil with care. There was a story about a young monk who came to his master frustrated after years of meditation. "I've practiced faithfully, yet I feel no enlightenment," he said. The master replied, "If you are washing rice, wash rice. If you are sweeping, sweep. Don't practice to awaken. Practice because it is time to practice." The monk frowned. "But when will I awaken?" The master smiled. "When you stop asking. Patience begins when you stop bargaining with time." We think patience means delay, but in truth, patience is the doorway to presence. To wait without anxiety is to live in peace with the unfolding moment. It is to understand that every stage of becoming, even confusion, even stillness, has its sacred role. I once walked through a field of lotuses in Cambodia. The flowers had not yet opened. A young novice walking beside me said, "They're late this year." The old gardener overheard and laughed gently. Lotuses are never late. They bloom when the sun is ready to meet them. That simple sentence became a teaching life does not operate on human time. It follows the quiet calendar of the cosmos. Patience also teaches humility. It reminds us that we are not the gardener of the universe, we are one of its seeds. And like every seed, we must trust the dark before we feel the light. There's a reason the Buddha is often depicted seated unmoving beneath the Bodhi tree. Enlightenment did not come to him because he chased it. It came because he waited with unwavering stillness. He faced temptation, distraction fatigue, and yet he remained. Patience in that moment was not delay. It was devotion. In daily life, patience can look like small kindnesses, listening fully, instead of interrupting breathing before reacting, allowing yourself to make mistakes without shame. These are quiet practices invisible to others, but they build the foundation of peace within you. Because impatience is always rooted in fear, the fear that life will not deliver what we need, that we'll be forgotten, that time will run out. But when we trust that the universe moves with intelligence, that every delay carries purpose, fear dissolves. You stop needing to force outcomes and begin to flow with them. The Chinese call this Wu Wei, effortless action. It doesn't mean doing nothing. It means doing what's needed, no more, no less, and allowing results to come in their own time. Like a river carving stone, patience creates transformation, not by force, but by persistence. Even suffering transforms under the gaze of patience. Pain held gently ripens into wisdom. Grief allowed to breathe becomes compassion. Anger witnessed without reaction turns into understanding. Nothing in life is wasted when seen through patient eyes. If you've ever watched an old tree through the seasons, you'll notice it never rushes to bloom or to shed. It stands utterly still, letting the sun and rain decide the pace. And yet year after year, it grows. You too are that tree. You do not have to rush your becoming. You are already growing even in your stillness. So tonight, breathe deeply. Whatever you are waiting for. Healing, clarity, peace, let it come in its time. Trust that life knows its own rhythm, and if you must pray, let your prayer be this: may I have the patience to see the beauty of the slow, the unfolding, the unseen. Because patience is not endurance, it is love stretched across time. From this still trust, another wisdom emerges, one that teaches how to live and let live the gentle balance of detachment and care. There is a misunderstanding about detachment, that to be detached means to stop caring, to turn cold, to withdraw from the world and its emotions. But in truth, detachment is not the absence of love. It is love purified of fear. It is the freedom to hold life with open hands, knowing that nothing real can ever be lost. The Buddha spoke of upadana, clinging as the root of suffering. We cling not only to people or possessions, but to ideas of how things should be, to our own stories, of what was fair or unfair, to our desires for permanence in a world that is constantly dissolving. Detachment, then, is not an escape. It is an awakening, a remembering that grasping cannot preserve what was never meant to stay. There is a story from an old Zen monastery. A master once held up a delicate glass cup and said to his students, "This cup is already broken." They looked confused. The master smiled. "To me, this cup is already gone, so I can appreciate it completely. When it holds water, I enjoy it. When it shatters, I thank it for its service. Knowing it will break allows me to love it fully." This is true detachment, not rejection, but reverence. Most of us live with hidden contracts in our hearts. We love in order to be loved back. We give hoping to be remembered. We help expecting gratitude. But life often tears up those contracts, not to punish us, but to show us that unconditional love cannot be built on conditions. Detachment dissolves those secret expectations and replaces them with freedom. When we are detached, we can finally love without the weight of ownership. I once met a mother at a temple in Chiang Mai whose son had moved far away. She said, "At first I cried every day. I felt abandoned. But one day, I realized my love doesn't need to live under the same roof to be real. It travels with him. It is not held by distance." There was no bitterness in her voice, only serenity. That is the quiet wisdom detachment brings. To practice detachment is to trust impermanence. Everything we hold dear, the faces we love, the bodies we inhabit, the dreams we chase, is passing through us like a river. When we fight that truth, we suffer. When we accept it, we begin to float. But do not mistake detachment for numbness. The detached heart does not stop feeling. It simply stops clinging. It feels pain, but does not become pain. It experiences joy, but does not try to trap it. It moves with life's rhythm instead of trying to control the song. There was once a monk who loved gardening. Every morning he would water the same small plot of flowers with great devotion. One day, another monk asked, "Why do you care so much, knowing that the blooms will fade in a week?" The gardener smiled, "Because that week is enough. That is detachment, to give yourself fully to what is, even as you know it will end." The practice of detachment begins with awareness. Notice when you tense up, when you grasp for control, when you argue with reality. Gently breathe. Ask yourself, what am I afraid to lose? Then look deeper. Can I love this even if it changes? When you begin to live like this, everything softens. The people around you feel freer. The heart no longer builds cages out of affection. Relationships become lighter, more honest, more alive. In Buddhism, This freedom is known as upekkha equanimity, the calm balance that comes when you are neither grasping nor pushing away. It doesn't mean detachment from life, but deep involvement with it, without the burden of needing to control it. I once knew a sculptor who said, "I used to think my art was about shaping stone. Now I realize it's about listening to what the stone wants to become." Detachment is like that, the humility to let things and people become what they are meant to be. The paradox is this: the less you cling, the more deeply you connect, because true connection is born not from possession, but from presence. You cannot hold what is alive. You can only meet it moment by moment with open hands. Tonight, ask yourself softly, what if I stopped gripping so tightly? What if love didn't have to mean control? What if letting go was the purest form of care? Breathe into that space. Let the river flow. Let people, moments, and memories pass through you without resistance. You will see that nothing essential is ever truly gone, only transformed. And as the heart loosens its grip, something even deeper begins to bloom: gratitude. Gratitude for everything that comes and everything that goes, because both are teachers. Gratitude is not a feeling we wait for. It is a practice that transforms what we already have into what we once prayed for. It is the soft turning of the heart toward what is instead of what's missing. In a world built on striving, gratitude is an act of quiet rebellion. It whispers, "This moment, just as it is already complete." The Buddha once said, "Let us rise up and be thankful for, if we didn't learn much today, at least we learned a little. And if we didn't learn a little, at least we didn't get sick. And if we got sick, at least we didn't die. So let us all be thankful." At first, this sounds simple, almost naive, but there is deep wisdom here. Gratitude is not about ignoring suffering. It's about seeing through it to the life that still pulses beneath. It doesn't deny pain, but it refuses to let pain define the whole story. I once met a man named Darius who had lost almost everything: his home, his job, his health. He lived in a small hut on the edge of a forest and spent his days carving small wooden figures. One evening, as we watched the sun sink below the trees, he said, "For a long time, I thought life had taken everything from me. Then one morning, I heard the birds, and I realized it had left me with sound. Then I noticed the light, then breath. I started counting what was left instead of what was gone, and it never ended." That is gratitude, the quiet revolution that begins when you stop measuring and start noticing. We often imagine gratitude as a reaction to good fortune, but the wise know it is a cause, not an effect. Gratitude doesn't come after happiness, it creates it. When you are grateful, joy ceases to depend on circumstance. In Buddhism, gratitude is closely tied to mudita, appreciative joy. To feel joy for the happiness of others is a higher form of gratitude, one that dissolves envy and connects us all. Because every blessing you notice in another becomes proof that goodness still exists. And if it exists, you are part of it too. There's a story of a monk who always bowed before eating his simple bowl of rice. A visitor once asked, "What are you giving thanks for?" "You eat the same meal every day." The monk smiled. "Precisely for that, the rice that never fails me, the body that still digests it, and the world that provides it. To live this way is to never run out of miracles." Gratitude also teaches humility. It reminds us that nothing we have, not our health, our loved ones, or even this breath, is truly ours. Everything is borrowed, everything is shared. When you see life as a gift, not an entitlement, even the ordinary becomes sacred. Try this before you sleep tonight. Name 3 things that carried you through this day. They don't have to be grand. Perhaps the warmth of a blanket, the sound of rain, the kindness of a stranger. As you name them, notice the subtle shift inside the softening of worry, the quiet return of enough. Over time, this practice rewires the heart. You begin to see abundance where others see lack. You find beauty in what once seemed mundane. You realize that the cup has always been half full, and that the other half is air, which you also need to breathe. I remember a nun who tended to dying patients in a hospice. I once asked her how she stayed hopeful amidst so much loss. She said, "Every morning I thank life for allowing me to serve. Every night I thank death for reminding me to love fiercely while I can." That was not optimism. It was enlightenment. Gratitude is not the denial of difficulty, it is its alchemy. It transforms fear into faith, chaos into clarity, and aging into grace. Even in the midst of suffering, gratitude says, "This too is teaching me something." And as we practice, something profound unfolds. We no longer see gratitude as a list of things we are thankful for, but as a way of seeing a lens through which every experience, pleasant or painful, becomes a gift. When gratitude fills you, you stop chasing more. You look around and realize this breath, this sky, this life, they are already miracles. The craving for something else fades. What remains is peace. As you breathe now, place a hand on your heart and whisper softly, "Thank you." Not to anyone in particular, just to existence itself for allowing you this moment. That whisper is enough to shift the entire rhythm of your soul, and from that deep well of appreciation rises the next truth, that compassion naturally grows in the soil of gratitude. Compassion is often mistaken for softness, a fragile emotion meant for saints and dreamers. But true compassion is not delicate. It is the fiercest, most resilient force in existence. It is what keeps the world from collapsing under its own suffering. To be compassionate is not merely to feel sorrow for another's pain. It is to stand inside that pain, to look directly at it without turning away, and to let your heart remain open anyway. The Buddha called compassion karuna, one of the 4 immeasurables, boundless qualities of the awakened heart. It is not pity, nor is it sentimentality. Compassion does not look down from a distance. It kneels beside the wounded, seeing no separation. I once met a nurse who worked in an emergency ward for decades. When I asked her how she endured such constant suffering, she said, "Compassion doesn't drain me because it's not about fixing people. It's about being with them without judgment." Pain shared this way doesn't multiply, it dissolves. That is the strength of compassion. It doesn't remove suffering, it transforms its atmosphere. There's a story told in the Buddhist tradition of a monk who was robbed while traveling. The thief, realizing he'd been caught, prepared to run. The monk called after him, "Wait, you forgot the moonlight." The thief stopped, bewildered. The monk smiled gently. "You may take my robe, my bowl, my coins, but you cannot steal what's already free, my goodwill toward you." Years later, that thief returned to the monastery not as a criminal, but as a student. Because nothing pierces the armor of hatred more deeply than undeserved kindness. Compassion, you see, is not weakness. It's courage in its purest form, the courage to remain gentle in a world that often rewards hardness. But compassion must begin with yourself. You cannot pour from an empty vessel. Many of us speak to ourselves with words we would never say to a friend, harsh, impatient, unkind. Yet the heart, like the earth, responds to the tone we plant in it. Self-compassion is not indulgence. It is wisdom. It says, This pain I feel is also part of humanity. I too am worthy of understanding. The Buddha once compared compassion to a mother's love, not because it is sentimental, but because it is unconditional. A mother doesn't stop loving her child because they've stumbled. She helps them stand. Likewise, compassion doesn't ask whether someone deserves it. It recognizes they suffer just as we do. If you look closely, every act of cruelty in the world is rooted in suffering misunderstood. When someone lashes out, it's often because they've never been shown tenderness. To respond with compassion does not mean allowing harm. It means refusing to add more harm to what already exists. I remember sitting with an elderly man who had survived great loss. His family was gone. His friends had faded with time. Yet his eyes shone with a strange peace. "Aren't you lonely?" I asked. He smiled. "Sometimes. But when I see others lonely too, I send them love in silence. It doesn't change the world, but it changes me. And that's enough. That's the secret of compassion. It heals the one who gives it as much as the one who receives it." In meditation, compassion is like a flame. The more you share it, the brighter it grows. It asks nothing in return. It doesn't depend on others' gratitude or goodness. It simply gives because giving is its nature. And when compassion ripens, judgment falls away. You stop labeling others as right or wrong, good or bad. You begin to see that everyone, including you, is doing their best with the understanding they have. The line between sinner and saint blurs. What remains is connection. As you move through life, remember this compassion is not found in grand gestures. It's in the quiet patience with a stranger, the forgiveness offered to yourself, the small acts of presence when others are in pain. To live compassionately is to carry a soft lantern through the dark, not to banish shadows, but to remind others they are not alone in them. And the more compassion you give, the lighter you become. Because compassion loosens the ego's grip, it melts away resentment, and it fills the spaces where bitterness once lived. Tonight, as you breathe, think of someone who suffers, perhaps someone who has even caused you pain. Instead of resentment, offer them this silent prayer. May you be free from suffering. May you find peace. May I learn to see you with understanding. That simple wish is enough to begin the world's healing. And as compassion opens the heart, it teaches us the next sacred truth that forgiveness too is not an act of weakness, but of liberation. Forgiveness is not a single act. It is a long walk home. It is the journey from clenched fists to open palms, from bitterness to understanding, from the prison of the past to the freedom of the present. We often mistake forgiveness for approval, as if to forgive means to excuse what was done to us. But forgiveness does not erase accountability. It simply releases our hearts from being chained to anger. It says, "I will not carry this wound any longer, even if you never apologize." The Buddha compared anger to holding a hot coal with the intent of throwing it at another. The only one burned is the one who refuses to let go. I once met a woman named Miriam at a meditation retreat. She had lost her sister to a drunk driver decades ago, yet she still spoke of the man with trembling hatred. "He destroyed my life," she said. "How could I ever forgive him?" The teacher simply asked her, "Who is destroying your life now?" The question fell like a bell in an empty temple. After a long silence, Miriam began to cry. That night, she didn't write the man a letter or pray for his soul. She just whispered into the dark, "I'm tired of hating you." That was the beginning of her freedom. Forgiveness rarely arrives in one grand moment. It often comes like dawn's slow, hesitant spreading light inch by inch until the darkness loses its hold. It may begin as the simple desire to feel lighter to sleep, without bitterness to stop replaying old scenes. That desire itself is already forgiveness taking root. Sometimes forgiveness means walking away without vengeance. Sometimes it means staying and setting boundaries. And sometimes it means forgiving yourself for not knowing better, for staying too long, for being human. Self-forgiveness is often the hardest of all. We replay our mistakes like films on endless loop, believing guilt is proof of love or decency. But guilt, when left unattended, becomes self-punishment. The Buddha taught that remorse is useful only if it leads to awareness. Once you have learned, let go. Punishing yourself does not undo the past. It only darkens the present. I once asked an old monk what forgiveness felt like. He smiled and said, "Like setting down a heavy bowl of water you've been carrying on your head for years. You don't realize how heavy it was until you let it go." Forgiveness does not depend on the other person's change or remorse. It is a decision made entirely within you to stop letting another's action dictate the quality of your soul. It is an act of spiritual defiance. When you forgive, you say to the universe, "You will not make me hard." There's a story in Buddhist folklore about two monks crossing a muddy river. They came upon a woman afraid to cross. One monk, breaking a vow of non-contact, carried her across. Hours later, his companion scolded him for touching her. The monk replied gently, "I set her down at the riverbank. You are still carrying her." That is how we live, carrying ghosts, long gone conversations, long finished faces, long faded. We drag them through every new moment, unable to notice the lightness waiting in their absence. To forgive is to finally set them down. It doesn't mean the wound never happened. It means the wound no longer defines who you are. It no longer shapes your joy or limits your peace. It simply becomes a chapter, one you can read without bleeding. In many monasteries, forgiveness is practiced daily. Monks bow before sleep and whisper, "If I have hurt you knowingly or unknowingly, please forgive me. If you have hurt me knowingly or unknowingly, I forgive you." It is a ritual cleansing of the heart, not for morality's sake, but for liberation's. Forgiveness, like compassion, is a form of wisdom. It understands that all harm arises from ignorance, from the illusion of separation. When we see this clearly, anger turns into sorrow, and sorrow into empathy. You can forgive and still remember. You can forgive and still walk away. You can forgive and still protect your peace. Forgiveness is not surrender. It is sovereignty. Tonight, as you sit in quiet reflection, think of someone whose memory still stirs pain. Don't force absolution. Just breathe their image into the heart and whisper, "May we both be free." That prayer doesn't require perfection. It only requires willingness. And that willingness, that single spark of openness, is enough to light the path forward. For when forgiveness softens the heart, another truth reveals itself, that freedom, real freedom, was never something to be won, only remembered. Freedom is one of those words the world uses often, but rarely understands. We talk of freedom as movement, the right to go where we wish, do what we want, speak what we believe. But the deepest freedom, the one the Buddha spoke of, is not about movement at all. It is about stillness, a freedom from the mind's endless grasping, from the stories that keep us bound to yesterday and afraid of tomorrow. Freedom is not outside of you. It is the space within you that remains untouched, no matter what the world gives or takes away. I once met a monk named Koan who had spent 10 years imprisoned for his beliefs. When he was finally released, people asked how he had endured such confinement without bitterness. He replied, "They could cage my body, but they could never touch the space where I watched my thoughts." That space was always free. That space awareness is your true refuge. Freedom does not mean escaping difficulty. It means meeting difficulty without losing yourself in it. When you are free within, you can walk through the fire and remain untouched by its smoke. The Buddha taught that clinging is the root of suffering, not because desire itself is evil, but because attachment mistakes impermanent things for permanent ones. We hold on tightly to roles, to relationships, to identities that inevitably change, and when they shift, we feel betrayed. But life never promised permanence. It only promised change. To be free is to stop fighting impermanence and start dancing with it. I once spoke with a woman named Hannah who had lost her sight late in life. When I asked how she managed, she smiled and said, "At first I thought I'd lost the world, but then I realized the world was never in my eyes. It was in my attention, and that no one can take." That is freedom, to find what cannot be taken from you. You begin to glimpse this freedom the moment you stop confusing yourself with your thoughts. A thought arises, "I'm not enough." Another follows, "I've failed." And we believe them as if they were truth. But you are not the thought. You are the awareness that hears it. The sky does not become the storm that passes through it. You are that sky, vast, still, and unbroken. Freedom lives in the pause, the space between what happens and how you respond. That pause is sacred. It is where wisdom lives, where karma is rewritten. In that breath, you are no longer a puppet of your emotions, but the witness of them. There's a teaching that says, when you are no longer a slave to what you love, nor a victim of what you fear, you are truly free. Freedom also means surrender, not to fate, but to reality as it is. When you stop demanding that life follow your script, you discover it has a rhythm far wiser than your plans. Like the river that bends around stones, freedom flows because it yields. It takes great courage to release the need to control. We often cling to suffering simply because it feels familiar. But freedom asks, what if I could let life move through me, rather than always trying to manage it? This is not a philosophy. It's a daily practice. Every moment gives you a choice to contract or to open, to resist or to allow. Each time you choose openness, the walls around your heart crumble a little more. You may not always feel free. You may still feel pain, grief, or uncertainty. But even in those moments, freedom whispers. You can feel this without becoming it. That whisper is your key. I once met a retired teacher named Nori who said, "All my life I tried to be strong. I thought freedom meant control. Now I see it means trust. I trust that life will unfold as it must, and I'm free even when I'm afraid." Freedom is not the absence of fear. It's the ability to walk beside it without letting it lead. Tonight, close your eyes and notice your breath. Feel how it moves in and out without effort. That's life always flowing, always returning. Freedom is the same. You don't create it. You notice it. You remember it. And once you've tasted that still space within, no circumstance can imprison you again. You can live in the middle of chaos and still rest in peace. Because freedom isn't a gate you pass through. It's the sky you've always been standing in. And from that vast inner space, a new truth arises that what you once called emptiness is not nothing at all. It is the fullness of being itself. Few words are as misunderstood in Buddhist thought as emptiness. To the untrained ear, it sounds bleak, like a void, a hollow silence, the negation of life itself. But the Buddha never taught emptiness as despair. He taught it as liberation, the realization that everything is connected, dependent, and flowing, and that nothing stands alone. Emptiness does not mean that nothing exists. It means that nothing exists independently. The flower is empty of a separate self because it contains the rain, the soil, the sunlight, the gardener. You cannot take away the sky and still have the flower. Likewise, you are empty of a separate self because you contain your parents, your teachers, your ancestors, the food you eat, the breath you share with the trees. You are the entire cosmos, appearing for a brief and miraculous moment. As you, when we see this truth, loneliness softens. We realize we were never truly alone, only unaware of the infinite threads connecting us. There's a Zen story about a monk who asked his master, "What is emptiness?" The master lifted a cup of tea, poured it full, and kept pouring until it spilled over. "Stop," the monk shouted. "The cup is full." The master nodded. "So is your mind. How can you receive truth when you are full of yourself? That too is emptiness. The willingness to empty the cup of the ego so that wisdom can be poured in. We spend much of our lives trying to solidify a self-building identities, roles, and reputations, all fragile as glass. We defend them fiercely, fearing their loss will mean our end. But emptiness teaches us what can be lost was never truly you. The Buddha once said, "Form is emptiness, and emptiness is form." This is not a riddle. It means that emptiness is not separate from the world of things, it is their very nature. Because everything is interdependent, everything is sacred. When you understand this, even ordinary moments shimmer with holiness. Washing a bowl, hearing rain, feeling the warmth of another's hand, all of it becomes the Dharma. Because in each act, the boundary between self and other disappears. I once spoke with an old monk who spent his life sweeping temple floors. I asked him if the work ever felt monotonous. He smiled. "When I sweep, I don't think of myself as sweeping the floor. The broom, the dust, the air, and we are the same motion. That is emptiness alive, not void, but vitality without ego." Emptiness also means freedom from attachment. When you realize that all things arise and pass away through conditions, you stop grasping. You stop demanding that people or moments stay fixed. You let them flow, not because you don't care, but because you finally understand that clinging distorts love. True love is born from emptiness. It expects nothing, fears nothing, possesses nothing. It is vast enough to hold everything without being confined by any of it. I once met a woman whose husband of 50 years had died. "I thought emptiness meant loss," she said. "But now I see he's everywhere. In the air, I breathe in the morning light, in the laughter of our grandchildren. I thought I'd lost him, but he only changed shape." That is the heart of shunyata, the Sanskrit word for emptiness, not absence, but interbeing. When you truly understand it, grief softens fear, diminishes, and joy deepens. Because you no longer see life and death as opposites, only as two movements of the same eternal rhythm. Emptiness also reveals a subtle truth about suffering. Pain hurts most when we believe it's ours alone. But when you see that even suffering is part of a greater web born of causes, conditions, and impermanence, it loses its sharpness. You begin to meet it with curiosity instead of resistance. In meditation, when thoughts arise, don't fight them. Watch them come and go like clouds crossing the sky. Notice how none of them stay. Notice that you, the witness, are not bound by any of them. That open, observing awareness that is the experience of emptiness, and here lies the paradox. When you embrace emptiness, life becomes fuller than ever. The colors deepen. The sounds of the world grow clearer. Every breath feels vast, connected, alive. Because nothing is taken for granted, every moment is a miracle appearing out of nothing, sustained by everything. So tonight, when you breathe in, know that you are breathing the same air that passed through mountains, forests, oceans, and the lungs of countless beings. When you breathe out, offer it back. You are not separate. You never were. Emptiness rightly seen is love without borders, existence without edges, awareness without owner. And from this vast living space, another wisdom blooms, one that speaks not of stillness, but of movement, of harmony, with all that flows, the beauty of impermanence. Impermanence, anicca, is one of the simplest truths, yet the hardest for the human heart to accept. Everything changes. Everything passes. The flower fades. The river shifts. The child grows. The body weakens. And even love in its form transforms. We know this, and yet we resist it, as though resistance could hold back the tide. But impermanence is not tragedy. It is the rhythm that makes life possible. Without change, there could be no birth, no renewal, no evolution of the heart. Without endings, there could be no beginnings. Impermanence is not life's cruelty. It is its compassion, for it ensures that no pain lasts forever, and that every joy, while fleeting, is infinitely precious. I once met an old calligrapher in Kyoto named Haru. Every morning he would draw a single circle in black ink and then burn the paper before sunset. I asked him why he destroyed his work each day. He smiled. Because the beauty is in the making, not the keeping. The circle teaches me that nothing stays and nothing needs to. In that moment, I understood impermanence is the art of letting life flow through you, not hoarding it. We suffer not because things end, but because we pretend they won't. We cling to youth as though time were an enemy to relationships, as though love were a cage to certainty, as though truth could ever be frozen. But when we look deeply, we see that impermanence is not the thief clinging is. The Buddha compared life to a candle flame. Its light appears continuous, but it is reborn every instant. Likewise, you are not the same being you were yesterday, not in body, not in thought, not in soul. Every breath reshapes you. Every experience rewrites your awareness. You are impermanence embodied, a living river pretending to be a stone. When you realize this, the fear of loss begins to soften. You see that endings are not punishments, but transformations. I remember sitting with a woman named Claire as she said goodbye to her dying mother. She wept, then laughed, then wept again. "She's fading," she said, "and yet the love keeps growing." That is the miracle of impermanence. Even as form dissolves, the essence deepens. The cherry blossoms of Japan bloom only for a week each spring. People travel from far away to witness their fragile beauty. Why? Because their transience makes them sacred. If they lasted forever, we'd stop noticing them. Their brevity teaches us to look, to feel, to bow before the fleeting. Impermanence is not a flaw in existence. It is its heartbeat. It reminds us that life's beauty is inseparable from its fragility. The dance is precious precisely because it will end. In meditation, when you feel sadness, don't push it away. Watch it rise, peak, and fall. Notice how even sorrow moves like weather, impossible to hold. In that observation, something shifts. You realize that nothing, not even despair, is permanent. The sky always returns after the storm. Understanding impermanence doesn't make us detached from life. It makes us more intimate with it. Because when you know that everything you love will change, you love it more deeply. You listen more closely. You say thank you more often. A Zen master once said, "The trouble with the world is that we want the cherry blossom and the tree to stay the same, but the cherry blossom must fall for the fruit to come. So too must each version of ourselves fall away to make room for who we are becoming." Impermanence also frees us from despair. If everything changes, then pain changes too. Suffering cannot last in a world that refuses to stand still. Even grief, no matter how heavy, will one day loosen its grip. You don't have to force healing. Time itself is a compassionate teacher. So tonight, reflect. What have you been clinging to as though it were meant to last forever? A dream, a version of yourself, a relationship, an image of what life should be. Can you thank it, bless it, and let it flow? Letting go is not giving up. It's giving in to the truth that life renews itself in every breath. And once you make peace with impermanence, you begin to see something extraordinary, that beneath all this change, there is a stillness that never dies, an awareness that witnesses it all, serene and untouched. To see that stillness, we must learn the next truth, that presence is eternity unfolding moment by moment. Presence is not a task to be achieved. It is the state that remains when striving ends. It is the timeless awareness that has always been here, watching, listening, breathing, before you even knew what you was. When you are present, the boundaries between past and future dissolve. You stop chasing what was or fearing what will be. You return to the only place where life actually happens now. The Buddha once said, "Do not dwell in the past, do not dream of the future. Concentrate the mind on the present moment." These words are not an instruction to abandon memory or hope, but to stop letting them steal the richness of this breath. Presence is not measured in time, but in depth. You can live 100 years and never truly be here. Or you can live one clear moment, utterly awake, utterly alive, and touch eternity. I once knew a violin maker named Thomas. When he worked, his focus was so complete that he seemed to vanish into the sound of the strings. "When I carve," he said, "there is no me, no wood, no knife. There is only movement, the act of listening to what the instrument wants to be." That is presence when the doer dissolves and only doing remains. In presence, life ceases to be a series of tasks to complete and becomes a symphony unfolding through you. The taste of tea, the feel of wind on your skin, the weight of silence in a room, all of it becomes infinite because you finally stop rushing past it. The mind loves to wander, but presence is not the absence of thought. It is the awareness of thought. You don't have to push your mind to be still, simply notice it. Watch your thoughts rise and fall like waves on the ocean. The ocean does not stop being vast because waves appear. Presence is that ocean still spacious, containing all things without resistance. There's a Zen story of a student who asked, "Master, what is enlightenment?" The master replied, "When you eat, eat. When you walk, walk." The student frowned, "But everyone eats and walks." The master smiled. "Not everyone is there when they do." Presence is not about doing different things. It's about doing the same things differently, fully, without fragmentation. Modern life teaches us to multitask, to split our attention into pieces. But presence asks for wholeness. When you are fully here, even the simplest act, sweeping the floor, watching the rain, becomes meditation. In truth, presence is not something we create. It's something we remember. The child within us has always known how to be present. Watch a child chase a butterfly, no goal, no clock, just wonder. That wonder never left you. It only became buried under the noise of becoming. To return to presence is to reclaim your natural state of awe. The mystics say that eternity is not endless time. It is timelessness, the dimension revealed when we step completely into now. When you are fully present, an hour can feel infinite because you are no longer measuring it. You are inhabiting it. In deep meditation, there comes a moment when all effort ceases, when the breath breathes itself, the body sits by itself, and awareness simply is. That stillness is not dullness. It is aliveness without boundary. You touch something that feels both vast and intimate, silent, yet vibrant, the eternal present that all sages have spoken of. Presence also heals. Much of our suffering comes from mental time travel, reliving old wounds, anticipating future pain. But when you return to the moment, the mind quiets and the body relaxes. You begin to see that right now you are safe. Right now you have enough. Right now there is peace. Presence is a kind of devotion, not to a deity, but to life itself. To be present is to bow before the miracle of existence, to say, I am here, and that is enough. It doesn't require silence or retreat. You can practice presence in the middle of the marketplace, in conversation, in traffic. Each breath is an invitation. Each step is a prayer. When you live this way, time feels different. You no longer race against it. You walk beside it. Each moment becomes a friend, not an enemy to outrun. Tonight, take a slow breath. Feel its beginning, its middle, its end. Notice how it arises unbidden, how it leaves without struggle. This is life. This is eternity unfolding in your lungs. Presence reveals that enlightenment was never somewhere far away. It was always right here in the still, unassuming grace of this very moment. And once you learn to rest here, another realization quietly appears, that awareness itself is not yours or mine. It belongs to everything. It is life's own seeing looking through your eyes. Every journey, no matter how long, eventually circles back to silence, not the silence of absence, but the silence that breathes behind all things, the same quiet that watched your first breath and will one day cradle your last. These 30 reflections have not been steps towards something new, but unveilings of what was always here, the gentle, timeless truths that hum beneath the noise of life. We have walked through the mind and its illusions, through pain and compassion, through the beauty of impermanence and the stillness of awareness. And now, at the end, we find ourselves where we began, in this single breath, in this simple moment, in this tender act of being alive. The Buddha once said, "Within this fathom-long body, with its perception and mind, I declare the world, the origin of the world, the cessation of the world, and the path leading to the cessation of the world." What he meant was simple yet profound. You don't have to search for enlightenment in distant mountains or endless scriptures. Everything, the joy, the sorrow, the awakening, happens here in your own heart. This entire path has been about remembering that truth. When you understand the mind is not you, you loosen the grip of thought. When you see that pain is not your enemy, you open the door to compassion. When you stop comparing, you remember your inherent worth. When you love without ownership, you touch freedom. When you forgive, you walk through the doorway of peace. When you embrace silence, you discover true strength. When you let go, you are free. When you realize you are not the center, you become part of everything. And finally, when awareness recognizes itself, when the watcher sees that it was never separate from what it watched, there is no longer a journey at all. There is only life shimmering as it is. No grand revelation, no blinding light, just an ordinary cup of tea, a soft breath, a heart that no longer struggles against what is. This is awakening simple, natural, unforced. Perhaps the real purpose of all these words has been to guide you back home, not to a place, but to the space inside that is vast, kind, and already whole. When you sit quietly and feel your breath rise and fall, know that the same rhythm moves the ocean tides and the stars. You are never apart from it. You never could be. So let the teachings settle like gentle rain. Don't cling to them. Don't even try to remember every line. Just live them. Live softly. Live awake. Smile more often. Forgive quickly. Listen deeply. And when life feels heavy, remember even this is passing. Even this is sacred. You are not here to perfect the story. You are here to witness it, to love it, and ultimately to let it go. In doing so, you become what you always were, the quiet heart of awareness itself. And that is peace.